Hey guys, tonight we're sinking into the kind of story that clings to your skin long after you've heard it. It's foggy, it's filthy, and it smells vaguely like rotten cabbage and coal smoke. Yep, we're headed straight into the gaslit guts of Victorian London, and just so you know, you probably won't survive this. Not because something's going to leap out and drag you into an alley, though statistically that might have happened back then, but because the things we're uncovering, they'll change the way you ever look at lace curtains, chimney sweeps, or the phrase gentleman's club. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your city and what time it is right now down in the comments. I want to know who else is out here, half awake, peering into the darkest corners of history with me. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're walking down a narrow lane just off Whitechapel High Street. It's late, the gas lamps flicker like they're fighting for their lives, and a sour mist is rising from the cobblestones. The buildings lean in close like eavesdropping old men, and every so often you hear a whisper or a cough, too close, too low. The city around you is massive, choking on coal and class and unchecked capitalism. Queen Victoria's been on the throne for over 40 years, and London is technically the most civilised place on earth. Emphasis on technically. But underneath all that empire polish, something festers. You can feel it as you pass under wrought iron archways and between shuttered shops. Everything looks closed except for the little glowing cracks in basement windows and the muffled notes of piano music floating up through the fog. You're not the only one on the street. There's a man hunched in a corner, maybe sleeping, maybe watching. A child, barefoot, steps past you like a ghost, vanishing into the shadows. This is East London, circa 1888. You've landed in a part of town the papers only mention when something unspeakable happens. And even then it's always a woman of ill repute, or a regrettable case of moral decay. The truth is slipperier than the cobblestones under your feet. It starts with the buildings, the ones that don't show up on maps. Behind certain doors marked only by a red handprint or a chipped brass number, whole worlds open up. Not the romantic candlelit fantasy version of brothels you see in period dramas. No. These are cramped, damp and sticky with secrets. Some are tucked behind fake apothecaries or down trapdoor alleys. Others pretend to be laundries, or piano schools or boarding houses, but if you knock the right rhythm or hand over the right coin, you're inside. What hits you first is the heat. These places are humid from bodies and breath and the cloying smell of too much perfume trying to cover up the smell of everything else. You hear whispers in a dozen accents: Welsh, Irish, Italian, Yiddish. The girls here don't come from nowhere, they come from everywhere. Some of them were born 2 streets over and ended up here because their mother died and their father disappeared. Some came all the way from Liverpool or Manchester, lured by flyers promising work in service that turned out to be nothing of the kind. The train stations are full of handlers, men and women both, who know exactly how to spot a new arrival with no money and no friends. You don't need to kidnap someone when you can offer a bed and a warm meal, then lock the door behind them. Here's your historical fact for the night. In 1857, a publication called the Maidstone Telegraph estimated there were over 8,000 prostitutes operating in London, but that number only counted the ones caught or known. Most estimates now go much higher, closer to 80,000, depending on how you define the work. That's roughly 1 in every 15 women in the city. But here's your quirky fact. Many of these brothels had actual menus, like in a restaurant. You could walk in, sit down, and browse options like the Flower of Ireland, the Turkish treatment, or a ride on the royal coach. The euphemisms were creative, if horrifying in hindsight. Some menus even included drinks and entertainments like amateur puppet shows between appointments. You cannot make this up. And now for your scholarly debate of the night. Were Victorian brothels truly underground, or was their existence simply part of a society-wide moral blind spot? Some historians argue that most people, especially upper-class men, knew exactly where the brothels were, used them frequently and just didn't talk about it. Others believe there was a genuine level of societal denial, where the problem was so large it became invisible. The truth likely sits somewhere between willful ignorance and conscious hypocrisy. You turn a corner and find yourself face to face with a painted woman in a corset that's more ribbons than fabric. She's not more than 17, with eyes that seem both empty and sharp at once. She leans in close, breathing gin, and asks if you're looking for company. You're not sure what to say, and she laughs, dry, bitter, bored. Then keep walking, love, you've not the coin nor the taste. She turns away before you can reply, disappearing behind a doorway that seems to swallow her whole. Every doorway here feels like a choice, and most of them are bad. Behind one of them, a girl is singing, off-key but sweet. You pause just for a second, letting your eyes adjust to the dim light seeping from a crack in the wood. Inside, someone coughs violently. Someone else moans, not with pleasure. You step back into the fog. You've only been out here 10 minutes and already the city feels heavier. Every brick is a secret. Every shadow is watching you back. Hey. You're starting to understand why so many people who entered these streets at night never walked out the same again, if they walked out at all. And this is just the beginning. You press onward, boots crunching through coal soot and old rain, deeper into the maze of soot-smudged alleys and whispering doorways. The gas lamps above your head sputter, like they're ready to give up, casting long, distorted shadows that stretch out across the broken cobbles. Somewhere a dog barks once, then abruptly stops. It's the kind of silence that rings in your ears, then you see it. From the outside, it looks like a tea shop, a cute little storefront with lace curtains, a hanging sign that reads Miss Ainsworth's Tonic Room, and a potted plant that gave up long before you arrived. The windows are fogged from within, but the doors cracked open slightly, and music, a soft, lilting tune on a badly tuned piano, seeps into the street like steam from a kettle. You step inside. The first thing that hits you isn't the sight, it's the scent. Not tea, not herbs, but something heavier. Musk, perfume, pipe smoke, sweat. There's a counter with delicate porcelain cups stacked in uneven towers, and a dusty shelf of tonics with labels like Nerve Fortifier and De Carrington's Blood Renewal Syrup. A woman sits behind the counter. She's too overdressed for a tea seller, with her dark red bodice and a necklace that could double as a weapon. She glances up, raises a single eyebrow, then gives the tiniest of nods. That's your silent invitation. You're in. You pass behind the counter and through a curtain, crimson velvet, heavy as gilt. And now you're somewhere else entirely. Low lighting, the glow of candles floating in glass bowls, velvet settees, embroidered cushions, a mirror wall at the back that doubles everything in a dreamy haze. But this isn't a tea room. This is a brothel in disguise, one of hundreds like it that peppered London from Clerkenwell to Shoreditch. Every one of them hiding in plain sight, protected by layers of illusion, money, and plausible deniability. A girl walks by wearing nothing but a sheer robe and a look of practiced indifference. She doesn't even glance at you. To her, you're not a person. You're a pocket of coin, maybe, or maybe just another ghost haunting this place. You notice a couple at the far end of the room, a man in a black coat and a monocle, lazily smoking from a long-stemmed pipe, young woman curled next to him, head resting on his shoulder like a pet. She can't be more than 15. Here's your historical fact. The Contagious Diseases Acts, passed in the 1860s, were originally designed to regulate prostitution by requiring suspected women to undergo invasive medical exams, without due process. If they refused, they could be jailed. Men, of course, faced no such scrutiny. The laws were supposedly for public health. In practice, they were a legal tool to control poor women and sweep them off the streets. Now, a little fringe detail you won't find in your average museum tour. Some of these underground brothels offered theme rooms before that was even a thing. Egyptian rooms, dungeon rooms, even pirate dens. There were houses that mimicked noble estates, complete with fake servants so rich clients could play out fantasies of defiling the aristocracy. There was one rumoured establishment where every girl dressed as Queen Victoria, wig, dress and all. Let that one stew in your nightmares. And here's tonight's scholarly debate. Were brothels like this primarily businesses run by entrepreneurial women, or were they simply extensions of male power structures, veiled in velvet? Some argue that madams had real authority, managing finances, security, even negotiating protection from police. Others believe that most madams were merely middle managers in a larger, male-controlled system that profited from selling women as commodities. It's murky, as most records come from court cases or moral reformers, not the women themselves. The woman behind the piano turns to you briefly, her fingers still trailing along the keys. She smiles. Her teeth are too white, her eyes too tired. She gestures toward a door at the far end. An upstairs room, you assume. But you don't move. You're not here for that. You're here to look, to understand, to feel the way the air vibrates with suppressed emotion, lust, fear, despair, amusement, boredom, all crammed into one low-lit space. Another man enters behind you, tall, bowler hat, clearly upper class from the cut of his coat and the gold of his watch chain. He doesn't look at the women. He walks directly to the bar, murmurs something to the madam, and slips a folded note into her palm. She glances at it, then at the back staircase. Her nod is slower this time. The man disappears into the shadows without another word. You wonder what was written in that note. A name? A request? A warning? Back outside, the city is changing. London in 1888 is a city of masks. Respectability and rot live side by side. Men who vote on morality laws by day sit in rooms like this by night. The same men who fund charities for fallen women also fund brothels with their silent investments. It's a carnival of contradiction, and no one wants the lights turned on. You exit the building just as another customer enters, brushing past you without apology. He smells like tobacco and arrogance. Outside, the fog rolls heavier now, yellowed by a lamplight and reeking of smoke. The buildings loom around you like tombstones, and you realise something odd. There's a rhythm to it all. A kind of choreography. The way the girls lean on the doorways, the way the clients arrive, like clockwork, the way the police stroll by without ever looking in. It's a system, an ecosystem, and it's been running a long time. Some of the girls smile when they see you. Some just look through you. One, sitting on a step with her knees drawn to her chest, says nothing at all. She's holding a kitten that might not be alive. You don't ask. There's a moment, just then, when you think you hear something. A song, faint, high-pitched. A lullaby. It's coming from an upper window. You look up, and for a second, you catch a silhouette framed in candlelight. A girl, perhaps, brushing her hair. Or maybe just a shadow. Then the light goes out. You don't remember walking away, but your feet are already moving, pulling you deeper into the city's tangled web where more red doors, more velvet curtains, and more secrets are waiting. And none of them lead to tea. You're moving now through the part of the city where the air thickens, where the smoke from chimneys curls like fingers trying to hold you back. The deeper you go, the less the gas lamps help. The fog here isn't romantic. It's oily, yellow, and clings to your skin like it knows what you've seen. Brick walls glisten with moisture and soot. Windows stare back, blind and shuttered, and every alley mouth looks like it's about to swallow you whole. You're near Euston Station now, or what passes for near in this distorted, winding sprawl of buildings that seem stacked on top of each other like a bad dream. This is where so many stories begin, or end, usually both. Imagine you're a 16-year-old girl stepping off a train from the country. You've got one bag, maybe a letter of reference from your vicar, and a vague idea that you'll become a maid or a seamstress or someone's governess. That's the story you've told your mum anyway. But there's no one waiting for you on the platform. The world smells like coal, and everything is louder than you thought it would be. And that's when she finds you. Not a man, a woman, older, well-dressed, and with a voice like warm syrup. She offers you tea, a warm room for the night, a chance to rest before you meet your new employer. It doesn't feel like a trap. It feels like a rescue. By the time you realise something's wrong, the door's already locked. Your clothes are gone, your letter's gone. And the girl in the next room says, "Best get used to it." Here's tonight's historical fact. In 1885, journalist W.T. Stead published a series called The Maiden Tribute of Modern Babylon, a lurid exposé about how easily a child could be purchased for sex in London. Stead even staged a real purchase of a 13-year-old girl to prove his point. His reporting caused outrage and ultimately led to the raising of the age of consent from 13 to 16. But it also revealed how common and casual child exploitation was in the city's underbelly. Now, the twisted fringe fact, there were underground training houses where abducted or coerced girls were broken in, physically and psychologically, before being sold to higher-paying brothels. These weren't rumours. Police raids, rare as they were, confirmed that such places existed. Often disguised as lodging houses or girls' work hostels, they were effectively human conditioning labs. You don't walk away from that kind of place. Not really. And the scholarly debate, how much did the average Londoner really know about this pipeline of recruitment? Some argue that the working class population was well aware. There were whispers in pubs, warnings from mothers to daughters. Others say it was mostly invisible to everyone but the predators and the victims. The truth likely depends on your postcode, and how much you were willing to see. Back in your own boots, you turn down a side street marked by nothing but a broken drainpipe and a chalked number on a stone wall. 17R Semmaham. There's no door, just a descending stairwell. And once you're down, you're somewhere colder. The air here is wet and metallic. You hear dripping. The walls are tight, claustrophobic. A thin bulb dangles overhead, swinging slowly from a breeze you can't feel. At the bottom is a door covered in green paint so old it's turned grey. You knock. No one answers, but the door creaks open anyway. Inside it's dim and low-ceilinged, with a smell that's hard to define. Wood smoke, mildew, blood. There's no velvet here, no painted smiles. Just beds with stained sheets and women too tired to pretend they're not in hell. You see one asleep or unconscious on a mattress in the corner. Another stares blankly at a wall covered in old newspaper clippings. A man walks past you with a bowl of what might be stew, muttering something in German. He doesn't acknowledge you. No one does. You're invisible here, a phantom walking through other phantoms. One of the girls glances up. Her face is a map of bruises and silence, but she smiles at you anyway. That's what breaks you. This place isn't even pretending to be a brothel. It's a warehouse of bodies. The girls here aren't working. They're being used, again and again, and until something gives out. And still, somehow, you go deeper. There's a corridor at the back lined with small doors. Behind one, you hear singing, off-key, frantic, childlike. Behind another, sobbing. You don't want to open them. You know what's inside, and knowing is enough. A sudden noise behind you, a sharp yell, boots on stairs. You slip out before the tension finds you, heart hammering, breath catching in your throat. Back into the alley, back into the wet cold. You stand there for a long moment, blinking against the flickering light from a pub window across the street. Inside, men are laughing. Someone's playing a fiddle. It could be a different world entirely. And maybe that's the worst part. Above your head, a sign creaks in the wind. It's unreadable now, too faded, too far gone. But once it probably meant something. A place of work, of hope, of legitimate purpose. Now it's a way station in a network of exploitation so vast and intimate it stretches from this alley to Parliament and back again. You walk on, not because you want to, but because standing still in this city feels like permission, like surrender. Around the next corner, there's another group of girls. These ones look fresher, cleaner clothes, practiced smiles. They lean against a railing, chatting like schoolgirls, until a client approaches. Then the masks come on. One of them winks at you. Looking for fun, love? You shake your head. She grins. Then don't stand around looking guilty. Makes people suspicious. You move on. Boots crunching glass and gravel, heart heavy. You've seen behind the curtain. And the thing about lifting a curtain is, you can't unsee what's back there. The street bends again, narrowing until it barely qualifies as a passageway. You shoulder through, brushing against damp brick on either side, the space tightening like the city itself is trying to swallow you. The air grows warmer, almost humid, and you catch the scent of rosewater, cheap gin, and something else. Something mineral. Blood, maybe. It sticks to the back of your throat. You emerge into a small courtyard paved unevenly with worn stones. Lantern light flickers from a nearby upper's window, and laughter spills out. A shrill, metallic kind of laughter that doesn't sound quite right. In the centre of the courtyard stands a narrow building 3 floors high, painted once in cream but long since faded to a sickly yellow. It leans slightly, as if tired of holding its secrets. You hesitate. The place doesn't scream for attention, but your gut tells you it matters. You step closer. On the door is a small brass plate, engraved with 2 words in flowing script. Madam Fenwick. You've heard that name whispered in alleyways, murmured in gin halls. She's not just a madam, she's the madam. If there's a chain of command in this underworld, Madam Fenwick sits near the top, somewhere between an empress and a mafia boss, depending on who's telling the story. No one's really sure where she came from. Some say she was once an actress at Covent Garden. Others claim she was a duchess cast out for scandal. The truth? Probably somewhere in the muck between the two. You knock, not expecting an answer. But the door swings open before your knuckles land a second time. Inside it's luxurious. That's the only word for it. Not clean exactly, but polished. Deep red carpets muffle your steps, and gaslight sconces glow with amber warmth. A young boy in a waistcoat, no older than 12, nods at you without speaking, and gestures toward the stairs. Up you go. On the second floor, the hallway opens into a grand sitting room. There's a fire burning in the hearth and mirrors everywhere, angled just so. You count 6 girls lounging on cushions and velvet divans, each dressed in a different style. One wears a silk kimono, another a French maid's outfit, and one is dressed like a schoolgirl. You feel the room watching you, even though no one moves. And then she appears. Madame Fenwick enters with the confidence of someone who's never had to say excuse me in her life. She's older than you expected, maybe mid-40s, with auburn hair pinned back tightly and lips painted a deep plum. Her eyes, however, are dead calm, the kind of calm that comes from watching too many things fall apart. Looking for company, she asks, her voice silk over steel. Or information? You pause. The second. She smiles, not kindly. Then you'll have to pay more. Here's your historical fact. During the late Victorian era, certain brothels catered almost exclusively to London's upper crust. Aristocrats, politicians, foreign dignitaries. These weren't street corner establishments. They were curated, guarded, even catalogued. Clients paid not just for flesh, but for discretion, power, and performance. Women here weren't always poor or desperate. Some were educated, multilingual, trained to play chess and quote poetry, all while undressing. Now for your bizarre fact of the night, some of these elite houses offered role play involving famous political figures. Yes, clients paid to be punished by women dressed as Queen Victoria, or to stage affairs with actors posing as cabinet ministers. The line between parody and perversion got blurrier the richer the client. You could sleep with the Queen in one room and be tried for treason in the next, all in an evening's entertainment. And the scholarly debate. Were powerful men frequenting brothels like Madame Fenwick's because of the sex, or because of the loss of control? Many researchers suggest that in a world of rigid class structures and relentless propriety, these men crave vulnerability, and here they could be humiliated, ordered around, even whipped, and it was all safely contained. Others argue the opposite, that the brothel was just another space where power was reaffirmed, only now with costumes and safe words. And no one agrees where the line between choice and coercion really fell. Madame Fenwick watches you closely. You're not here to buy. You're here to ask. That's risky. She taps a long fingernail against her wineglass. What do you want to know? You ask her about the networks, the trains, the girls from Wales, from Ireland and from the tenements of Glasgow. You ask her about the auction rumours, about theme houses, about the missing girls who never make it past the first week. She doesn't flinch. You think I run this city's sins, she says, sitting slowly. So I don't. I manage a corner of them. I pay the constables. I feed the judges, but I don't control the hunger. That comes from men with names you'd recognise, names that sit on plaques in churches. She looks down into her glass. I just give them what they want, and I keep the girls alive long enough to choose something different. You ask her if she believes that. I believe in survival, she replies. Everything else is expensive fiction. A girl enters the room, whispers something into Madame Fenwick's ear. Her expression hardens. You should go, she says. Now! You don't wait to be told twice. Back on the street, the city feels louder, sharper. A cart rattles past, pulled by a tired horse and driven by a man who looks like he hasn't slept since the Crimean War. Somewhere nearby, church bells ring the hour. Midnight. And in this part of London, midnight is when things really wake up. You think about Madame Fenwick. The power in her eyes, the fear beneath it. You wonder how many women like her there are. Brothel queens who know more than the Prime Minister, who keep the gears of empire greased with silence and survival. Then you see a constable on patrol, his uniform crisp, his moustache waxed. He tips his hat to you, you tip your head back, and as he passes, you notice the small envelope in his hand, folded just like the one you saw earlier tonight. He disappears down the alley without a backward glance. It's all connected, and now you know that, you can't pretend otherwise. The envelope still lingers in your mind as you walk, crisp and white, passed from gloved hand to polished uniform like it meant nothing at all. But you know better now. That envelope was currency, a quiet agreement. A guarantee that no one knocks on Madame Fenwick's door uninvited, no matter what screams echo from the upper floors. London runs on money, yes, but more than that, it runs on silence. Bought silence. And in this city, that's more valuable than gold. You take a detour down one of the wider lanes, past a row of buildings that look almost respectable, tall windows, carved pewter columns, names etched in brass above the doors. But these aren't law firms or banks, they're brothels too. Just different kinds, the body markets, as the locals call them. No pretences, no curtain of tea and lace. No. Women are advertised like produce. You step into one without knowing why. The foyer is lined with mirrors and velvet ropes. A man in a top hat lounges behind a small desk, reading the racing form. He barely glances up. Shilling to browse, 2 to stay. You drop the coin and move inside. It's like a twisted gallery, a showroom. The main hall is dimly lit but arranged meticulously, like an auction house before a sale. Girls sit on stools or lean against the wall in deliberate poses, wearing corsets or chemises, some barefoot, some in heels far too high for comfort. Each one has a number pinned to her bodice. No names, just numbers. A man in a fur-lined coat strolls past you, muttering to himself as he peers at each girl in turn. No, too old, no, too dark. Number 7 maybe. The girl with the number 7 stares straight ahead, jaw tight, hands clenched in her lap. You feel sick. Here's your historical fact. By the late 19th century, the commodification of women in London's underground brothels had reached industrial levels. Some establishments kept ledgers, literal inventory lists with notes on appearance, ethnicity, age, and temperament. Clients could request specific types, like ordering furniture. Many girls were never asked their names. They were simply numbers, bodies to be used and discarded. And now for the grotesque fringe truth. Some of these markets operated under the pretense of employment agencies. Girls were brought in, examined, even measured, height, weight, waistline, then shown off to men claiming to be looking for housemaids or companions. Once purchased, the girls were delivered to private residences or brothels. No wages, no freedom, just new locks on new doors. The scholarly debate tonight: whether the women in these establishments had any agency at all, or if the appearance of choice was part of the trap. Some historians argue that the higher-end body markets at least offered regular meals, shelter, even a share of the earnings. Others insist that choice in such a setup is meaningless, when the only options are submission or starvation. The word agency becomes slippery in a world where saying no gets you beaten, and saying yes keeps you breathing, barely. You walk further into the room. A boy, maybe 13, stands at the far end. His suit is too big and his eyes are too knowing. He holds a clipboard and watches everyone like a hawk. Clients, girls, you. He doesn't blink. A bell rings, soft and delicate. From behind a curtain, a new girl emerges. She's tiny, trembling, dressed in white. Her number is handwritten, a fresh edition. She glances around the room and flinches when her eyes meet yours. You see something behind her, something moving. A man in shadows, motioning her forward. She obeys. You want to intervene, you really do. But something about the air here, it holds you back, like every breath costs a piece of your courage. As you exit the building, the cold hits harder than before. Your hands shake, and not just from the wind. You make your way toward the Thames. The river has a sound to it tonight. Slow, dragging, almost mournful. You lean against the railing, staring down at the black water, wondering how many people have stood right here and thought about vanishing into it. How many girls were told they were worthless, used until broken, then tossed away like waste. And how many men left those same buildings feeling proud, entitled, untouchable. Downriver, you see the faint glow of a paddle steamer docked for the night. Music carries faintly across the water. Probably a private party, nothing unusual, but you wonder who's on board. A duke maybe, an investor, a judge, a man who spent his evening selecting a numbered girl and is now drinking champagne under the stars like he's earned it. A voice behind you speaks. They sell boys now too. You turn. An old woman stands nearby, hunched in a shawl, eyes pale but sharp. She spits into the river. Saw it myself, she continues. Last week. Kid no older than 12. Black curls, skin like ivory. Watched him go into the back door of number 41 with a banker. Never came out. Not yet, anyway. You ask if she tried to stop it. She laughs bitterly. And get thrown into the Thames myself? I'm old, not stupid. You ask why she's telling you this. Because maybe you'll do something with it, she says. Or maybe you'll just remember it better than the rest. She walks away without another word. You stay there a while, staring at the river. listening to the city breathe, and you realise this isn't just about desire, it's about power. Who has it, who wants it, and what they'll pay, or steal, to keep it. The brothels aren't just places of sin, they're places of exchange, bodies for secrets, silence for access, control for coin, and as long as London needs its secrets kept, those doors will stay open. You leave the river behind. It sloshes on in the dark, uncaring, sweeping scraps of the city out to sea, ashes, bones, broken promises. The cold sticks to your coat now, drawn tight around your chest, as if you're trying to keep more than your body warm. You walk with your head down, past shuttered market stalls and drunk men slumped in doorways. Somewhere nearby a fight breaks out. A shout, a crash of glass. And just as quickly silence returns, thicker than before. You find yourself in a narrow mews off Dorset Street, the infamous do-as-you-please lane. Even here, where sin is practically the wallpaper, things feel heavier tonight. There's a door ahead, painted black, framed by crumbling brick and a flickering lamp above. No sign, no knocker, just a single white ribbon nailed to the frame. A signal of sorts. You step inside and nearly trip. It's dark and the hallway stinks of iron and spoiled milk. Candles gutter in rusted wall sconces. A man slouches on a stool near the stairs, snoring loudly, his head rolled back against the wall. You pass him, and the stairs creak like they're protesting your very existence. The room you enter isn't a parlour or a showroom, it's quieter, colder, cleaner. Tiled walls, surgical tools laid out on a small side table. A girl sits in a wooden chair near the fireplace, her head tilted like a doll that's been dropped. She's pale, lips dry, eyes too wide. A woman in a nurse's apron wipes blood from the floor with a rag. This is not a brothel. This is what comes after. Abortions were illegal in Victorian England. That didn't stop them from happening. They just happened in places like this. Here's your historical fact. In the 9th century, it was common for sex workers to seek remedies from underground midwives or unlicensed surgeons. The procedure, often referred to as bringing on the monthlies, was dangerous, painful, and frequently fatal. Many of these women never made it home. Their bodies were buried quietly or worse, sold for dissection. Your fringe fact: some brothels were directly connected to illegal abortion clinics, not just physically through trapdoors and false walls, but economically. It was a cycle. A girl became pregnant, the pregnancy was terminated, she went back to work, over and over. In some establishments, the procedure was offered as an employment service, a dark kind of job security. Tonight's scholarly debate: was this access a form of agency, however grim, or simply another facet of exploitation? Some argue that even within horror, the right to terminate a pregnancy gave these women a sliver of control over their bodies. Others suggest that control is meaningless when the choices are made under duress, coercion, or sheer desperation. The morality of the era pretended to protect women. In practice, it protected their oppressors. You turn to leave, but the nurse stops you. She doesn't speak, just stares, like she's trying to remember if she's seen you before. Maybe she has. Maybe everyone's face starts to look the same down here. Back on the street, you hear laughter again. Not the shrill kind this time, but something else. Unnerving. Forced. You follow it to a side passage where two men lean against a doorway, smoking cigars. They wear bowler hats and silk waistcoats, talking too loudly for the hour. One of them says, "French girl's back. Teeth fixed this time. Doctor did a good job." The other grins. Still screams in Italian though. They burst into laughter. You don't go inside, you don't need to. You keep walking until the city grows quiet again. This time not from sleep, but from sheer saturation. It's like the buildings themselves are tired of bearing witness. The bricks want to forget. The glass in the windows has seen too much. At the end of the lane, there's a pub, the Bent Anchor. You slip in unnoticed. The place is packed with men, dock workers, merchants, a few with silver-tipped canes pretending to be slumming it. The air is thick with smoke and spilled ale. A girl with a torn hem and quick eyes moves through the crowd with a tray of drinks. She's maybe 14, maybe younger. She catches you staring and shrugs. "Better than starving," she says, like it's a line rehearsed 1,000 times. You find a quiet spot near the back against the wall. From here you can see everything. A man dragging a girl onto his lap. A boy in makeup offering a cigarette to a customer twice his age. A group of 3 men whispering in German. Passing coins under the table. The brothel isn't always a place with beds and velvet and doors that click shut behind you. Sometimes it's the back of a pub, a rented room upstairs, a corner table where deals are struck, promises made, innocence priced like meat at market. The girl returns with a drink you didn't order. She places it in front of you with a grin. "From the gentleman in the corner," she says, tilting her head. You glance over. A man in a navy coat lifts his glass. You shake your head. The girl shrugs and scurries off. You leave through the back out into a yard that smells of wet hay and urine. A cat scampers past, yowling. Somewhere nearby, a baby cries and isn't comforted. The sound drifts upward into the night, caught by the brick and soot and rain, swallowed before it reaches the stars. You're beginning to understand something essential. It's not just the brothels that are underground, it's the whole damn city. The lives, the stories, the pain, it's all been buried beneath layers of politeness and empire justifying myths. Victorian London loves its appearances. It worships the clean surface. But if you scrape even a little, just a fingernail's worth, you hit rot. And yet somehow people keep surviving here. The girls, the boys, the ghosts. They find corners to hide in. They keep breathing, even when they shouldn't have to. You look up at the sky, no stars tonight. Just clouds. Heavy, wet, waiting to burst. The next place doesn't have a name. No brass plate, no velvet curtain. Not even a whispered nickname passed through pubs and parlours. It's just there, tucked behind a tannery to knees. The entrance hidden between two piles of stacked barrels that reek of fish guts and dye chemicals. You wouldn't notice it unless someone told you exactly where to look, which fortunately or unfortunately someone did. You duck under a crooked beam and step through a door so low you're forced to stoop. Inside, everything changes. The room is dark, intentionally so, lit only by narrow slits in the wall where candlelight filters through coloured glass. Red, green, violet. The effect is strange. Like standing in a kaleidoscope that's forgotten how to turn. There's a scent in the air too. Not unpleasant, but thick. Incense, maybe, or opium smoke laced with something floral. Lavender? Rose? Whatever it is, it pulls at your senses, makes your head feel floaty. A girl appears, or at least you think she's a girl. It's hard to tell in the shadows. She's wearing a mask, white porcelain with painted lips and a single beauty mark under the eye. Her body's draped in silk that shifts as she moves, like water rolling off polished stone. She says nothing, only gestures for you to follow. You do. The hallway is a corridor of velvet drapes and curtained alcoves. Sounds drift out as you pass, laughter, gasps, the clink of glass, and the occasional sharp crack of leather against flesh. You pause at one curtain, where shadows flicker in rhythmic motion. Someone moans, not in pain exactly, but not pleasure either. Something in between, something older. Welcome to the fancy trade. Here's your historical fact. By the 1870s, London's sex trade had fractured into categories: streetwalkers, parlour girls, courtesans, and then the so-called fancy women. These were the specialists, the ones who catered to the exotic, the forbidden, the theatrical. Some of them wore costumes, others performed elaborate rituals. There were women who dressed as animals, nuns, schoolmasters, men who offered to be hunted through candlelit rooms on all fours. The line between sexuality and performance blurred until neither could stand on its own. And here's your fringe fact. One such establishment, rumoured to be in Soho, offered what was called the cabinet. Clients would pay triple to enter a locked wooden box, soundproof, windowless, and a chosen performer would do whatever they wished outside it. Some said it was about hearing without seeing. Others claimed it was about being seen without knowing. Most people didn't talk about it at all. Not publicly, not unless they were drunk enough to forget the details. Tonight's scholarly debate centres around a single question. Was this elaborate kink culture a form of liberation or a deeper level of degradation? Some argue that the fancy trade gave women and some men rare control over their environment. They set prices, designed scenes, built personas. In a world where poor girls had no choice, these ones carved identities for themselves. But others point out that it was still a system built on objectification, especially when clients weren't just requesting acts, they were purchasing types. The French maid, the Nubian queen, the geisha, the schoolboy, a whole market founded on stereotype and fantasy. Back in the hall, your masked guide turns a corner and stops at a wooden door. She knocks twice, then disappears behind a curtain without waiting for a response. The door opens, inside is a single room, round like a tower chamber. Candles line the walls in niches and mirrors hang from chains in every corner, tilted downward at odd angles. On the floor are furs, real ones, scattered like the remains of a hunt. In the centre sits a man in a velvet armchair, smoking a long pipe and wearing antlers. You blink. No, really. Actual antlers fixed to a leather harness strapped around his head. His bare chest glistens with oil, and his eyes, dark, amused, meet yours without a trace of shame. "You're early," he says. You open your mouth to speak, but he waves a hand. "Don't bother. Wrong person. Go. You go." Back in the corridor, the masked girl is waiting again. She leads you to a small room near the exit. No furs, no mirrors. Just a bench and a table with a notebook lying open. Its pages are filled with names, or more accurately, nicknames. The Scholar. The Flagellant. The Duchess's Dog. Some have check marks next to them. Others have X's, and some are underlined in red. You feel your stomach tighten. Just as you're about to close the book, you see a name you recognise, a real name, a real titled, extremely public name. It takes every ounce of willpower not to tear the page out. You shut the notebook carefully and step away. Behind you, someone coughs softly. You turn to find another masked girl holding a glass of green liquid. "Complimentary," she says, voice soft as thread. You shake your head. Outside again, the air feels too sharp, too loud. The shadows have edges now, and the fog doesn't feel mysterious. It feels like camouflage, as if the whole city is a performance, and you have just stumbled into its dressing room. You walk quickly past warehouses, stables, and pawnbrokers. Your footsteps echo strangely in your ears, still ringing from what you didn't quite see. The fancy houses might seem rarefied, luxurious, controlled. But underneath the silk and the masks is the same old truth. People are currency, identity is performance, and someone is always watching. You pass another alley just as two figures disappear inside. One wears a cloak, the other follows on all fours, led by a leash. You don't look back. At the corner of the street, you spot a constable standing in full uniform. You wonder if he knows what goes on just a few doors down. Then he reaches into his coat and pulls out a card, the same folded shape you've seen twice now, and disappears behind a red door. You realise grimly that he knows exactly what goes on. They all do. You wake the next morning, if you can call this hour morning, with the city's damp breath still clinging to your clothes. You haven't slept? Not really. Just sat hunched on a bench under a soot-streaked archway near Spitalfields, watching the fog roll through like it's running late for a funeral. There's a strange quiet at dawn in Victorian London. Not peaceful, just the pause between nightmares. You hear hooves on cobbles, someone retching into a gutter, a church bell marking the hour. 5 o'clock, the hour when the respectable world begins to stir, and this disreputable one finally stops pretending it ever slept. Today you're not walking, you're being led. A boy named Oliver, thin, twitchy, no older than 12, found you behind the baker's and tugged your sleeve. Said you'd been noticed, which in this city could mean anything from a backroom invitation to a knife between the ribs, but something in his eyes told you it wasn't a threat, just an opportunity. He leads you now through streets you don't recognise, even though you've walked this city all night. A hidden London, buried within London, narrower alleys, low arches, locked courtyards that open with special knocks. He doesn't speak much, but when he does, it's quick and quiet. Said you was asking questions, said maybe you'd want to see. You ask who they are. He shrugs. The Watchers. That doesn't clear anything up. Eventually you arrive at a door so nondescript it feels like a deliberate statement. You're not meant to find this place unless someone wants you to. Oliver knocks once, then 3 times, then once again. A pattern. A password. The door opens with a groan, and you're ushered into the gloom by a figure in a brown coat and gloves. You catch no name, no welcome, just the scent of tobacco and chalk dust. You're underground now. That much is clear. Stone walls drip with condensation. The air is cooler, heavier. The sound of your footsteps bounces oddly off the walls, swallowed by the darkness. The first thing you see are the windows. Except they're not really windows. They're slits. Tiny rectangular openings cut into the walls, with glass panes so blackened you'd think they were mirrors. But then you move closer and realise you're looking through them. Into rooms, lit rooms, velvet curtains, sofas, beds. You're in the wall, looking into someone else's world without them knowing. It hits you all at once. You're inside the Watcher's gallery. Here's your historical fact. Certain high-end brothels in Victorian London contained observation chambers, small crawl spaces or walled galleries where paying clients could watch others without being seen. Sometimes it was voyeurism, sometimes it was blackmail, and sometimes it was simply about power, the ability to look without consequence, to remain untouchable while others were exposed. Your fringe fact for tonight? Some of these watching galleries weren't just for clients. They were run by private clubs, unofficial societies of voyeurs who pooled resources to build elaborate observation points behind the walls of brothels and houses of interest. These clubs had names like the Owls, the Gentlemen Below, and the Society of Glass. Membership was exclusive. Rumour has it that at least 2 members of the royal family belonged to one. And here's the scholarly debate. Were these viewing galleries evidence of organised voyeurism or of systemic surveillance? Some suggest these setups were intended to collect information, observe officials, gather compromising evidence, control with scandal. Others believe it was just another symptom of unchecked privilege, men so bored by regular vice that they needed distance, detachment, a god's eye view of someone else's degradation. Either way, it's a twist in the narrative most history books leave out. Back in the gallery, you peer through one of the slits. What you see is unsettling. A girl, young, red-haired, is standing perfectly still in the centre of the room. She's blindfolded, dressed in white, her hands clasped in front of her like she's waiting to recite a prayer. On the sofa beside her, a man lounges, fully dressed, swirling a glass of wine. He watches her for a long time without speaking. Then he stands, walks around her once, and leaves the room without a word. The girl never moves, not even after the door clicks shut. You watch 5 more rooms after that. In one, a woman cries quietly while someone paints her back with a brush dipped in what looks like ink. In another, a man sits in a rocking chair with 3 girls asleep at his feet, their heads resting on his knees like dogs. In a third, no one is there, just a table laid for dinner and a string quartet recording playing on a gramophone. The entire setup is for a guest who hasn't arrived yet, or maybe already left. You step back from the slit. The man in the brown coat stands beside you. "We keep records," he says, voice flat. "Who comes, who pays, what they ask for. Sometimes we sell that information, sometimes we don't have to." You ask who the clients are. He looks at you. "Everyone!" That lands heavier than you expect. He leads you out a back stairwell, up through a trapdoor, and into what appears to be a candle shop. Shelves lined with wax pillars, dripping sculptures, and twisted tapers. The scent of lavender and beeswax is overwhelming. Oliver is gone, so's the man. You're alone in the shop, but not really. A small mirror above the door catches your eye. You walk to it and realise it isn't a mirror. It's another window, looking in this time, at the shop, at you. You leave fast. Back on the street, the world looks wrong, too open, too bright. The idea that someone might be watching you now, that they have always been watching, is no longer just paranoia. It's history, hidden, institutionalized, sanitized by time. You think back to the notebook in the fancy house, the real names, the pseudonyms, the check marks. You understand now. The brothels weren't just dens of vice, they were theatres. Banks, vaults, information hubs where secrets traded hands with bodies. And behind every red curtain, there was likely a slit in the wall, an unseen watcher, a ledger quietly filling with names. And maybe you're in one now. Maybe someone's writing you down. You leave the candle shop quickly, footsteps echoing too loud on the uneven pavement as the day begins to unspool. Market stalls creak to life. The baker's fires are lit. A milk cart clatters by, the horse too thin, the driver too young. Somewhere nearby, a chimney sweep sings off key as he climbs a ladder 2 stories high with a brush twice his size. The city's wearing its daytime mask again, lace gloves over broken fingers. But now you know too much to be fooled. Daylight doesn't clean anything here. It just makes the filth easier to ignore. Your next stop isn't obvious. You follow instinct more than direction, pulling at a thread you can't quite see but know is there. You pass a row of buildings in Lambeth that used to be townhouses, now all converted into lodging rooms, where the cost of a bed is counted in hours, not nights. You walk through the narrow alleys behind the music hall, the laughter from inside muffled by the thick brick walls that have heard too much already. And eventually, you find yourself outside a black-painted door marked only with a subtle swirl of chalk. It's not like the other places you've seen. This one's quiet, unassuming, No lanterns, no lace, no perfume trailing out onto the street. You knock twice, wait, then push. Inside, the silence deepens. There's no music, no chatter. Just the sound of pages turning and the occasional scrape of a chair. The room is sparse, bare wood floor, whitewashed walls, and 3 small cots arranged neatly by a fireplace that's long since gone cold. At a table sits a man, head bent over a book, his shirt sleeves rolled to the elbows, spectacles perched at the end of his nose. He looks up when you enter but doesn't smile. "You're early," he says, marking his place and closing the book with a soft thud. "Or maybe I'm late." You ask what this place is. "A house of boys," he replies plainly. "Not a brothel, not officially, not anymore." You look around, there is no sign of life, until one of the cots shifts and a small head emerges from the blanket. A boy. Young, pale, hair the colour of tea, skin too clean for this part of town. He sees you, and flinches, pulling the blanket higher. The man doesn't move to comfort him. "I don't keep them," he says flatly. "They come here when there's nowhere else. I give them food, soap, silence." You ask who he is. He sighs. "No one important. I used to play piano, now I make lists." He gestures toward a shelf filled with thin notebooks, each labelled only by date ranges. You step closer and realise what they are. Logs. Records of boys who passed through. Ages. Names, real or chosen. The places they came from, the men they left with, or the ones they ran from. One entry reads, "Small frame, brown curls, Milo, refused to speak for 4 days, taken by French-speaking client, never returned." You swallow hard. Here's your historical fact. Male prostitution in Victorian London was widespread but deliberately erased from public discourse. Often referred to only in coded terms. The blackmailers. Mary Anns. He-mollies. These boys and young men were pushed to the fringes of both society and history. Many operated in and around Hyde Park, Charing Cross, or near military barracks. Some were as young as 8. Others lived dual lives, shoeshine boys by day, something else entirely by night. Your fringe fact, there were entire underground networks built around this trade, many of them protected by influential clients who passed boys between them like business cards. They used code phrases like buying a bundle or hiring a page. And some houses, like the one you're standing in now, served as neutral ground, safe havens for boys trying to escape the trade, even if only for a night. And the scholarly debate. Did these boys have any kind of solidarity, any sense of self-recognition as a class of victims or workers? Some scholars suggest yes. There are letters, scraps of journals, and oral histories that hint at shared knowledge, coded language, even mutual protection. Others argue that they were too fragmented, too young, too brutalized to form any kind of resistance. The system didn't just exploit them, it isolated them. You sit in the corner and watch as another boy enters the room. This one has a torn satchel and a limp. He drops onto a cot without a word. The man makes no comment, only pushes a bowl of bread and lard across the table and returns to his book. The silence isn't comforting, but it's safe. That alone seems rare. You ask him why he keeps the notebooks. He doesn't look up. So someone remembers. That lands harder than it should. You flip one open at random. There's a sketch inside, done in ink. A boy's face quick and loose like it was drawn fast before the details faded. Underneath, went by kitten, smiled when he slept. You feel something tear inside you. Before you leave, the man offers you a small card, blank until you tilt it in the light. Then faintly words appear, the Society of Lamplighters. No address, no symbol, just that. You step back into the street stunned by the silence of it all. How easily this world hides behind the noise of the city. The music halls, the carriages, the laughter spilling out of gin shops, all of it a soundtrack to a story no one wants to hear. You wonder how many boys walk these streets right now, small and quiet and burning with secrets. You wonder how many never make it to a place like this. How many trust the wrong man. How many stop speaking altogether because it hurts less than being heard. You tuck the card into your coat. The street looks different now, not because it's changed, but because you have. And behind you the black door swings shut with the quietest of clicks. You walk slowly now, like the city's pressing down on you. The buildings lean just a little closer. The chimneys stretch a little higher, and the fog seems to thicken with every breath. Everything's too quiet, too still, like London's holding its breath, waiting for you to realize something you haven't quite let yourself say aloud yet. There's no safety here. Not really. Just layers. Layers of denial, of velvet, of opium smoke, of paperwork, of perfume, and underneath all of it, bleeding through, is the truth. Your boots squelch in last night's rain as you turn down a narrow alley near Drury Lane. It's wide enough for 2 people to pass if they don't mind touching shoulders. The walls are mossy, cracked with age. Ahead, a door swings open, and a man stumbles out, clutching his stomach like it's about to escape. He vomits into the gutter, mutters something about poisoned cherries, and disappears into the fog. Charming, you follow where he came from. The place doesn't look like much. Brown brick, crooked windows, and a red gas lamp out front that flickers erratically like it's dying of syphilis. But the name over the door is painted in gold leaf. The Crooked Fig. You've heard of it? Everyone has, even if they don't admit it. Not the most expensive brothel, not the dirtiest, just the strangest. A place where reality bends a little. Where medicine and madness meet. And tonight, you're walking straight into it. Inside, it's quiet. Too quiet for a brothel. No music, no laughter, no creaking bedsprings. Just the click of heels and the shuffle of bare feet. A narrow hallway leads you to a large room lit by candle chandeliers. The floor is black and white tile, like a chessboard. A woman glides across it in a silk gown, carrying a silver tray. On it, syringes, little glass vials, and a jar of something that might be leeches. She doesn't make eye contact. To your left, a man is laid out on a couch, shirtless, breathing heavily, while a girl dabs his forehead with a cloth soaked in something pungent. He mumbles in Latin. She whispers back in French. You keep moving. This isn't a brothel, not really. It's more like a hybrid, a sort of pleasure house and operating theatre all at once. Here, clients come not just for bodies, but for treatments. You round a corner and spot a sign painted on a wooden board nailed to the wall. Available services, bloodletting, 4 shillings, leech application, 2 shillings or £3, pox therapy, non-guaranteed, 6 shillings, morphia. Repose. Inquire within. You keep walking, and now the smell hits you. Something chemical. Not filth, not decay, but antiseptic. Sharp, metallic, medicinal. And beneath that, the faint, clawing aroma of perfume. A desperate attempt to cover the rot. Here's your historical fact. Victorian London was in the throes of a syphilis epidemic. It swept through brothels, boarding houses, and aristocratic bedrooms alike. And because science was still a mix of miracle and guesswork, treatments ranged from the horrifying to the hilarious. Mercury was the most common cure, despite the small inconvenience of, well, mercury poisoning. And since the disease was seen as punishment for sin, most victims were left to suffer in silence. Here's your fringe fact. Certain brothels, like the Crooked Fig, advertised themselves as clinics. Clients came believing they could receive treatment and pleasure in the same visit. Some were convinced that the girls themselves had healing powers. One house in Whitechapel claimed their holy maidens could draw out disease through intimate contact. You'd laugh if it wasn't so grim. And the scholarly debate, whether these so-called medical brothels were scams, delusions, or early attempts at holistic health. Some researchers argue they were a response to the complete failure of Victorian medicine to care for the working class, especially sex workers. Others see them as clever marketing, draping exploitation in the language of care. Either way, the line between patient and product was about as thin as a silk chemise. Back in the hallway, you pass an open door. Inside, a man sits naked on a stool while a woman gently applies a poultice to a set of open sores on his back. He moans, not sexually, not in pain, just from some place in between. On the floor beside them is a bucket half full of blood. You move on. Down another corridor you find a small library. Books stacked neatly, most of them medical. A few are records, ledgers of who came in, what they paid for, what symptoms they showed. One catches your eye. Ladies' observations. You flip through it, pages of notes in tight, careful handwriting. Descriptions of sores, of coughs, of tremors. A small sketch of a woman's mouth. Gums swollen, teeth loose. Next to it, confirmed case, no money for mercury, discharge to street. You close the book. At the far end of the room is a door marked private. You knock once, no answer. You open it anyway. Inside, a man in a long coat sits at a desk covered in vials, journals and bones, actual bones. Human by the look of them. He doesn't flinch when you enter. "Looking for a cure?" he asks, scribbling in a book with a quill pen. You tell him no. He glances up. His face is hollow, jaw lined with scars, eyes ringed and grey. He nods slowly. "Good. We haven't got one." You ask him what this place really is. "A study," he replies, "of consequences." Before you can ask more, he returns to writing. You're dismissed without words. Back in the street, you gulp the outside air like it might scrub your lungs clean. But the chemical taste lingers, and that's when it hits you. The brothels were never just about sex. They were petri dishes, laboratories of desire, pain, shame, illness, and power. Everything London didn't want to admit it had, hidden in a room with a locked door and a perfumed girl on the bed. You look down at your hands. They're shaking. You need sleep. You need daylight. You need to forget what you saw. But you also know you won't. Not now. You sleep for 2 hours, maybe 3. It's the kind of sleep that doesn't rest you, just presses pause on the unravelling. When you wake, your neck is twisted, your legs are numb, and there's grime on your collar that definitely wasn't there before. You've curled up on a bench near Covent Garden, head against a wooden post surrounded by crates of turnips and the slow, shuffling rise of morning commerce. A dog sniffs your boot. You mutter something half-coherent and scare it off. That counts as a victory. The sun is up now, or trying to be. The sky is a milky grey that can't quite commit to weather, and the streets are filling with the city's daily masquerade. Ladies in bonnets walk arm in arm. Newspaper boys shout headlines about coal strikes and a missing vicar. A man in a top hat tips it at a flower seller. You'd almost believe this place was normal. Almost. But you know better. Because today, your next stop is a place no one talks about in polite company. You're headed to the Opium dens. The entrance is through a laundry. It's always a laundry, that or a fake bakery. This one's especially convincing. Smells of soap and steam, sheets drying on lines, a woman humming tunelessly in the back. But when you ask for the feather pillow, the woman's humming stops. She tilts her head, studies you, then gestures toward the rear door with a raised eyebrow, like she's daring you to keep going. You do. Down a narrow set of stairs, through a hallway slick with condensation, you enter the underworld. Again, but this time it's quieter, sleepier. The room is long and low-ceilinged, with mattresses lining the walls like hospital beds. Men and women lie curled in nests of fabric, clutching pipes or sleeping open-mouthed, eyes twitching behind closed lids. The air smells like smoke and sugar and sickness. A boy, barefoot, in ragged linen, kneels beside a brass lamp, tending the coals. He sees you, nods once, then goes back to his work without a word. You step carefully between bodies, unsure where to look. A woman in a silk slip murmurs something in Cantonese as you pass. A man in a military coat is weeping quietly, face turned to the wall. One couple lies tangled together on a mattress, motionless, breathing in sync. You didn't expect this. You expected debauchery, chaos. Instead, you find surrender. Here's your historical fact. Victorian London was flooded with opium. Imported from British colonies, it was legal, cheap, and widely available in forms like laudanum, pills, and, of course, smoke. While the working classes tended to frequent dens like this one, the upper class preferred their opium in ornate vials, mixed with alcohol or syrups and prescribed for everything from migraines to hysteria. Doctors gave it to infants. Writers claimed it inspired them. Prostitutes used it to forget. And your fringe fact? There were certain brothels known specifically for their opium lounges, where clients could experience both sex and hallucination in tandem. These dens often had theme rooms, fabric walls, incense, even sound effects. One establishment in Soho supposedly offered death simulation, where the client would be drugged, undressed, laid in a coffin-like bed, and resurrected by a girl dressed as an angel. A bit much, maybe, but London never did anything halfway. And now for the scholarly debate. Was opium a form of rebellion or submission for sex workers? Some argue it offered a rare escape, an hour's peace, a numbness that dulled the trauma. Others see it as a tool of control, handed out freely by madams and pimps to keep their girls pliant and quiet. Addiction blurred the line between choice and captivity, as it always does. In the far corner of the room, a curtain flutters slightly, revealing another passage. You follow it, past more sleepers, till the air changes again, denser, hotter, almost holy. You've entered the pillow room. The name isn't metaphorical. The room is full of pillows, velvet, silk, burlap, wool, piled high, strewn across the floor. The air is thick with sweet smoke and humming, yes, humming, from a group of women seated in a circle, knees touching. Their eyes are closed, and each holds an opium pipe like a prayer stick. In the centre of the circle is a single candle, flickering. Above it hangs a small mirror suspended on string. You step too loud, and one of the women opens her eyes. Her pupils are blown wide, her lips dry and cracked. She smiles slowly. "Come to forget?" she asks. You shake your head. "Too bad," she says. "Nothing makes sense when you remember." You don't stay long. Back in the hallway, a girl is helping a man to his feet. He's older, maybe 50, but he clutches her hand like a child. She holds him steady as he stumbles toward the stairs. You think they might be father and daughter. Then she kisses his neck and whispers something obscene. Maybe not. You finally climb back out into the street, the light almost offensive after the gloom below. You blink, adjusting, and wonder how many of the women you've seen down there started with a rescue job. A warm bed, a lie wrapped in lace. And how many never saw daylight again? You keep walking, heart heavy, stomach hollow. At the corner you spot a poster pasted to a brick wall. "Laudanum for ladies, relieve your monthly distress." Below it another ad. "Dr. Fielding's nerve drops, bring peace to hysterical wives." And under that, scrawled in charcoal, they call it medicine. We call it sleep. You don't know who wrote it, but you know they're right. The city's built on layers, yes, but it's also built on sedation. Everyone's trying to sleep through something, a memory, a crime, 100 unpaid debts. And you're wide awake now, unfortunately. The sun creeps higher, but the shadows don't recede. They just shift, crawl sideways, tucking themselves into alleyways and shop fronts, clinging to the undersides of awnings like soot. You've passed the point of pretending you're just observing. You're in it now, deep. Every face looks suspicious. Every open door feels like a dare. And even the chimneys seem to be watching you with their hollow, smoke-ringed mouths. You find yourself on Great Windmill Street, close to Soho, but just far enough from the polished shop fronts and theatre facades to let the grime show. You stop in front of a building that once might have been a school or a printing house. Now it bears no sign at all. The windows are thick with dust, and the door hangs open by a sliver, like it's been expecting you. You enter without knocking. Inside, it's dim but not dark. A single oil lamp flickers on a counter. The room smells faintly of polish, tobacco, and stale beer. You don't see anyone at first, just shelves lined with ledgers, old newspapers, and small boxes stacked floor to ceiling. It's quiet, but not the peaceful kind of quiet, the kind that hums like a held breath. Then you hear it, a laugh, dry, male, too close. From behind a shelf steps a man in uniform, not just any man, a Metropolitan Police Inspector, and that chill down your spine? That's your body reminding you how deeply you've wandered into a place where the people paid to protect are often the ones collecting the rent. "You've been busy," the inspector says, eyeing you like a butcher eyes a cut of meat. You nod because what else are you going to do? He picks up a file and flips it open. Looking into brothels, underground ones, the kind that don't make it into the tour books. You don't respond, he smiles. Good. Means you're asking the right questions. Just be careful not to ask the wrong people. He drops the file on the desk with a thud. You glance at the label, Vice Division. Internal notes. Here's your historical fact. In the late 19th century, the Metropolitan Police had a vice division specifically tasked with monitoring prostitution, gambling, and other immoral activities, but more often than not, they were part of the very system they were meant to regulate. Corruption ran deep. Officers accepted bribes to ignore certain brothels to protect powerful clients, or to make inconvenient girls disappear. Sometimes they even acted as recruiters. Your fringe fact? There were rumours, never officially confirmed, that certain police precincts kept their own informal houses, not to investigate them, to use them. These places weren't on any official list, and their girls didn't get protection, only instruction. In some cases, officers exchanged immunity for access. and if a girl broke the silence, she'd vanish faster than a body in the Thames. And tonight's scholarly debate was the failure of law enforcement to police the sex trade a matter of systemic rot or calculated restraint? Some argue that the Met simply didn't have the manpower or infrastructure to keep up with London's vast, sprawling vice economy. Others insist the inaction was deliberate, because too many powerful men had too much to lose. The law, after all, is only as honest as the men writing it. The inspector moves to a cupboard and pours 2 fingers of gin into a glass. He doesn't offer you any. "We're not all dirty," he says after a sip. "Some of us actually try to do something, but you start pulling on threads in this town, and you'd better be ready for the whole tapestry to come down." You ask him why he's telling you this. "Because sometimes the only way to keep a secret," he says, "is to make sure you understand what happens when it's not kept." He doesn't need to spell it out. You thank him, though you're not sure why. You leave quickly, past the shelves of files and logs and names. So many names. Back on the street, the skies turn the colour of dirty milk. The clouds hang low, heavy with unfallen rain. The city continues around you, like nothing's wrong. Carriages rattle by, shopkeepers won't sweep their steps. A woman calls out for her lost cat. It's almost offensively normal, but you notice something. At the corner, 2 officers speak to a group of girls huddled near a doorway. At first, yes, it looks routine until you see the subtle nod from one of the girls, not fear, recognition. Then one officer slips something into the hand of the tallest one, and she disappears inside the building without a word. You follow. The building's interior is familiar. The perfume, the dim lighting, the velvet curtains trying to make rot look romantic. But there's no pretense here. No piano music, no painted ladies with rehearsed smiles, just business. You wait in the shadows and watch. The officer reappears 10 minutes later, adjusting his collar. He says nothing to the other girl at the door, just leaves. You ask her what that was. She looks you up and down. Routine check. You nod, because now you understand the rules. Some brothels stay open because they know who to pay. Others stay open because they know who to protect. And some just have enough dirt on the right people to guarantee silence. At this point, you're not sure what's worse, what the law ignores or what it actively supports. As you walk away, you notice something new. A mark on the side of the building. A triangle inside a circle drawn in chalk. You've seen it before, twice now. Once outside the brothel with the observation windows. Once near the boys' shelter. A symbol. A network. You're not just finding isolated cases, you're tracing a system. One with its own codes, rules and reach. And you've just been noticed by the people who built it. You tuck your hands deep into your coat and keep walking. Eyes forward, mouth shut. Because in this city, survival doesn't come from being right. It comes from knowing when to be quiet. You start the day with a theory and a train ticket. The theory? That London's most powerful men didn't just frequent brothels, they curated them, funded them, invented them. That every red door hides not just a sin but a ledger, and that behind the illusion of filthy streets and desperate girls, there's an order to it all. A structure. Someone at the top. The train ticket takes you west, out of the suffocating alleys of Shoreditch and Whitechapel, toward the manicured calm of Kensington and Marylebone. The rails clatter beneath your feet like a warning, too late to turn back, too fast to stop. Outside the window, the city shifts. Soot-streaked tenements give way to private gardens, coal smoke becomes a chimney curls. And the shadows here, they're trimmed, polished and painted with respectability. You step off at Baker Street and blend into the parade of gentlemen with canes and women with lace gloves. No one looks at you twice. You could be anyone here. A clerk, a cousin, a ghost. The building you're looking for doesn't say brothel, or... Of course not. It says Cavendish Club, gentlemen only. Carved in stone, no less. The kind of place with a footman out front and a chandelier visible from the street. You walk past it twice before slipping into the alley beside it. That's where you find the other door. Unmarked, naturally. Wood-stained dark. Handle polished by years of discreet fingers. You knock once, then again, and wait. Eventually a man opens it, middle-aged, black suit, face blank. You say the phrase you were given by a girl near Soho. I am here for the reader's copy. His eyes flicker. He steps aside. Inside, the space is quiet, carpeted, smells faintly of cedar and something older, paper maybe. You're led down a hallway and into a room filled with books, but not just any books, ledgers, stacks of them. Thick, leather-bound, some cracked with age, others fresh enough to still carry the scent of glue. You flip one open, names, dates, payments, services rendered. Not written crudely, not even in code, just neat looping script. You read the first line. Sir H.B., Room 4, requested Amelia, costume milkmaid, 3, 12th. You don't recognise the name, but in the next ledger you do. Lord C.M. of Parliament, Room 7, 2 girls, age 13, 15, 1 hour, felt, your stomach turns. You turn the page, here's your historical fact. In the 19th century, there were printed guides circulated privately among elite men in London, known unofficially as gentlemen's directories or sporting guides. These books rated brothels and their workers like restaurant critics. The most infamous of these was the Swell's Night Guide, which described women in vivid, degrading detail, sometimes using aliases, often not. Your fringe fact? These books were cross-referenced with private club records. Some exclusive London clubs kept logs of their members' extracurricular preferences, everything from mistresses to preferred entertainment when hosting foreign dignitaries. There were even star ratings beside certain girls' names, with notes like clever tongue or performs well under duress. Yes, they really used those words. And the scholarly debate, were these books documentation of a hidden world or tools of systematic abuse? Some argue that by recording preferences and patterns, these ledgers show the stark reality of elite involvement in the sex trade and serve as proof of accountability. Others say the books themselves were a form of domination, not just of the women, but of the information. To catalogue a life like an itemised expense is to erase the person behind it. Back in the reading room you find another section. Folders marked with simple letters. C, K, R, V. You choose one at random. Inside are sketches, pencil drawings of girls, some clothed, some not, some bound, some clearly crying. These aren't records, they're trophies. You put the folder down carefully. Your hands are shaking. The man who let you in stands silently by the wall, watching you. You ask him what this place is. He tilts his head. Documentation for the society's use. You ask who's in the society. He shrugs. Those with access. You press further. Why keep records like this? 'Cause memories are unreliable, he replies, and money is not. You walk out faster than you came in, the air colder somehow despite the spring day. You pass the front of the Cavendish Club again. A man in a brown hat steps out, buttoning his coat. He sees you, pauses, smiles faintly. You don't recognise him, but he recognises you. You turn the corner and lean against a wall, chest tight, mouth dry. There are no more questions now, no more how could they or did they know. The ledgers answered that, they all knew. They paid for it, documented it, rated it, revisited it. And now you know too. You walk until your legs ache. Past carriages and statues and manicured hedges. You don't stop until the air starts to smell like coal smoke again. Kiss. Until the buildings lean in close and the cobbles turn uneven. Back where the girls don't have real names. Back where the boys sleep with their shoes on. Back where no one keeps ledgers, because no one has the luxury of being remembered. You pass a girl huddled near a bakery door. She offers you a smile she doesn't mean. You hand her a coin you can't afford to give, and you keep walking, because someone, somewhere, wrote down her name, and now you're going to find out what they did with it. You know you're getting close when the light starts to feel nervous. It's evening again, though it's hard to tell in London's year-round haze. The lamps are being lit by boys with poles and soot-streaked jackets, and the fog has returned, not the dramatic, cinematic kind, but the real thing, thick, wet and clinging. You walk through it like you're inside the lungs of something ancient and sick, and it's breathing on you. You're headed toward Fleet Lane. The locals call it the drop, not because it slopes, though it does, but because it's where things fall and don't come back up. Names, girls, entire buildings, even time. You wouldn't find it on a tourist's map or in a paper's gossip column, but if you're looking for the edge of London's pleasure economy, where the fun curdles into fear, this is it. The house you're looking for is at the end of the lane, red brick, 3 stories, windows, boarded like they've seen too much. There's no sign, but you don't need one. The air's already warning you off. The closer you get, the colder it becomes, not the temperature, but something under your skin, a stillness, like the earth here doesn't want to echo your footsteps. You knock. A woman answers. She's tall, ageless, with a long braid that rests down her spine like a noose. She doesn't smile, just opens the door wider and walks away without a word. You follow. Inside, it's not just dark, it's quiet. Too quiet. Not the hush of comfort or secrecy, but the heavy silence that follows something terrible. You notice immediately, no music, no candles, no perfume. Just a long hallway lined with closed doors, each one identical, each one numbered. The woman stops at the foot of a staircase. You go up, she says. If you're sure. You're not sure, but you go anyway. The second floor is colder than the first. A corridor leads to a series of small rooms, each one just slightly ajar. You peek into the first, empty. Just a chair and a basin. The next has a bed. Bare. The third contains something else entirely, a series of ropes hanging from a beam. Not in a decorative or playful way, but in a functional way. There's a bucket in the corner. You don't ask what it's for, you keep going, and then a sound. Finally, a soft creak. You step into the last room. There's a girl on the floor sitting cross-legged, her arms wrapped around her knees, her eyes flick to you. No fear, just calculation. You here for them, she asks. You ask who she means. She jerks her chin toward the wall behind her. The ones who pay for screams. You've heard of this place, of these places. The ones that aren't about pleasure or even roleplay. The ones that serve the dark few who don't want sex. They want something else, something worse. Here's your historical fact. In the 1880s, several punishment brothels were documented, not in police reports, but in the whispered accounts of survivors and reformers. These weren't common, they weren't popular, but they were real. Houses where clients paid not to be served but to dominate, hurt, humiliate, sometimes beyond repair. Your fringe fact? There were private collectors, wealthy men, who paid to watch rather than participate. They'd sit behind screens or mirrored glass while others performed violent scenes. Some even brought sketch artists to capture the moment. These drawings, crude and disturbing, were traded like currency among a hidden circle known only by initials, a kind of elite horror club. And the scholarly debate? It hinges on how widespread these brothels really were. Some historians believe they were outliers, isolated pockets of extremity. Others argue they were simply the places polite society pretended not to see, the ones where the worst instincts of powerful men were not only tolerated, but encouraged. Because if a girl didn't survive, well, there were always more girls. You sit down on the floor opposite the girl, she studies you. Not afraid, not angry, just detached. You writing this down? She asks. You tell her no. Pity, she says. Won't last long otherwise. She stands slowly, like every joint hurts, and limps to the corner of the room, pulls up a floorboard, reveals a stack of papers, crumpled, tear-stained but written in clear looping script. You ask her what they are. Testimonies, she says. They make us say it out loud sometimes, confess what happened. Makes the men feel better. You pick one up. The ink is smudged, but you can make out the words, I did not scream at first. He didn't like that. You put it back, you leave the room, but you don't leave the feeling. It stays with you as you walk back down the stairs, past the silent woman, past the numbered doors, and out into the fog-soaked night. The city greets you again like nothing's happened. Carriages roll by. Children chase each other down the street. A woman with a basket of apples calls out her prices. And yet, just one street behind it, there's a building where people pay to harm and hurt in silence. And nobody stops it. You think of the girl's papers, the ink, the bruises, the fact that she still had to whisper her truth into the floorboards. You pass a constable not 5 minutes later. You wonder if he knows what's just a block behind him. Then he nods at you, and you know he does. The question starts echoing in your head long before you even realize you're asking it. Who are these people during the day? You've seen what happens at night. You've seen the gaslit filth and the silk-draped pain and the doors that open for coins and close for silence. You've followed girls down into basements and boys into galleries and watched names get written into books like receipts for groceries. But what happens after? Where do they all go when the sun comes up and the gas lamps flicker out and the world pretends to be decent again? You start looking for double lives. You start finding them. It begins at morning mass, not because you're religious, but because the trail leads there, a tip from a girl outside a tavern, barely 16 who told you the man she services every Thursday sits front row in church every Friday morning. Always the same seat, she said, smirking. Hands smell like lavender soap and guilt. So you go. St. Giles on a Friday morning is quiet, like everything inside it is holding back. Light filters through stained glass in broken shards of red and gold, and the air smells of old wood, candle wax, and the kind of incense that's meant to distract, not soothe. You sit near the back, wait. He arrives at 7:05, tailored coat, clean collar, a man with a face that's designed to vanish into crowds, mid-40s, serious mouth, eyes like he's permanently solving an arithmetic problem. He kneels, crosses himself, mutters, prayers you doubt he believes. His lips move too fast, too rehearsed. You follow him when he leaves, not too close, through the square, down a lane, into a narrow townhouse painted a modest grey. He lets himself in with a brass key and disappears behind a door etched with his initials. 2 hours later, you find out who he is, clergyman, specifically Canon Walter Hughes, advisor to the Bishop of London. Public sermons on temperance, published pamphlets on the moral decay of the working class, gave a rousing speech just last month about preserving the dignity of womanhood. You find a copy of it on a poster board near the market. You rip it down, and that's just the beginning. Here's your historical fact. Many of Victorian London's most vocal moral reformers, clergy, parliamentarians, educators, were deeply embedded in the very systems they decried. It wasn't just hypocrisy, it was strategy. Condemn in public, indulge in private. As long as the people on the pulpit were the same ones funding the police, the silence was absolute. Fringe fact? Some brothels gave their clients aliases, not for discretion but for fantasy. A constable might pay to be the bishop. A merchant might pretend to be a pauper. There's even that record of a duke who paid to be whipped while pretending to be a woman accused of witchcraft. These weren't just kinks, they were rituals. A way to process the cognitive dissonance of preaching purity while practicing perversion. And the scholarly debate? Were these men victims of repression or architects of a double standard designed to protect their own appetites? Some historians argue that Victorian England's strict social codes created unnatural pressure, and the resulting private depravity was inevitable. Others counter that the codes weren't strict at all. For the powerful, they were merely weapons, rules enforced on others, broken freely by those writing them. By mid-afternoon, you're sitting in a music hall dressing room. The girl next to you is named Eliza, though that's not her stage name. On stage, she's Fifi Bell, a Parisian darling with a fake accent and a real whip. But right now, she's barefaced, feet up, eating bread with pickled onions and watching you with one eye half closed. "You're looking for double lives?" she asks. You nod. She points at herself with the crust of her bread. Ta-da! You ask how long she's been doing both, music hall by day, brothel by night. "Since I was 15, they cross-promote, you know. Gentleman sees me on stage, comes backstage, slips the madam a note. And if he's paid up, I'm off stage for a while, it's very organised." You ask if it bothers her. "Only when I sing," she says. "That's when I remember I could have been something else." You sit with her for a while. She talks about men in top hats who cry in her lap, and lords who beg her to kick them in the chest. "Most of them don't want sex," she says. "They want attention, or punishment, or permission." She takes your hand suddenly. "You want to see something?" She leads you to a small alcove near the back of the theatre. Behind the velvet curtains, there's a hidden panel in the wall. She slides it open with a ringed finger and reveals a passage. Not wide, not tall, but real. "Tunnel goes to the brothel next door," she explains. "For the ones who want to sneak in like rats." You ask who uses it. She smirks. MPs mostly. You exit the music hall in a fog. You walk past a school and wonder which of the teachers has a name in the ledgers. You pass a barrister's office and picture the man behind the desk spending his evenings in corsets. You glance at a carriage and wonder if the woman inside is a duchess by day and a dominatrix by night. The city is full of masks, and now you can see the strings behind them. By night they climb into basements and whisper secrets into foreign mouths. By day they teach, preach, vote, inspect. They speak of duty. They print posters. They raise their children. Some of them are kind, some are monsters. Most are just terribly afraid of being found out, afraid of what they want, afraid that the parts of themselves they pay to hide might slip out under the wrong gas lamp. And now that you've seen both sides, you can't separate them anymore. You no longer know who's clean and who's merely well washed. The music hall bleeds into the brothel like it's always been part of the same structure. You walk the length of the hidden corridor Eliza showed you, hands brushing the damp stone walls, breath catching on the scent of old coal and rouge. and emerge into a hallway lined with fading oil paintings. Everything is red. Not elegant red, no burgundy velvets or polished mahogany, but a deep, sticky crimson that looks too much like something you shouldn't touch. Even the candlelight has a flush to it. The wallpaper peels, revealing layers of older wallpaper beneath it, and under that, probably more paper or rot or just the slow breath of the building trying to forget itself. You've just entered one of the most infamous performance brothels in London. It doesn't have a real name, at least not one that's written anywhere. Clients refer to it by nicknames, the curtain call and the encore, the backstage door. It's where theatre girls double as courtesans, and sometimes courtesans pretend to be actresses. The line is thin. Everything here is an act, including your presence. The madam greets you with the tired elegance of a woman who once made money modelling for painters, and now makes it managing the fantasies of men with expensive tastes and cheap intentions. Her name, or the name she uses, is Cora. Her dress is satin, the colour of faded blood, and her hair is piled high in a style 20 years out of fashion, but held together by pure willpower. "Looking for someone?" she asks, not unkindly. "You say you're looking for a story." She snorts. "Darling, we all are." She offers you a chair in her parlour, where the walls are lined with photographs. Sepia-toned girls in lace gloves and feather boas, all eyes and posture. You recognise a few, not by name, but from posters, from the stage, from places where applause masks exploitation like powder over bruises. Cora pours you tea. You don't drink it. "You want to know how the theatre links to this world," she says, settling opposite you like a queen before a battle. "It's not a link, it's a pipeline. Here's your historical fact. In Victorian London, music hall performers and chorus girls were routinely assumed to be sexually available, whether they were or not. The working-class girls who danced or sang for tuppence a show often supplemented their income with paid companionship. In fact, stage doors were notorious pick-up points. Men waited with flowers, coin purses, or contracts. Some offered dresses and dinners, others offered less. Your fringe fact? Several talent agencies operated as thinly veiled pimping operations. They recruited girls under the guise of theatre training, placed them in cheap boarding houses, and connected them with wealthy patrons, often aristocrats or foreign visitors. Some even kept ledgers tracking which performers had the best client satisfaction, as if the girls were chorus parts to be cast and recast. It was performance, yes, but not the kind with curtains. And here's the scholarly debate. Were theatre girls participating willingly in a transactional system, or were they coerced by poverty and societal expectation? Some historians frame them as savvy operators, using beauty and visibility to escape hard labour and climb the social ladder. Others argue that the choices were always stacked. Glamour hiding desperation, agency wrapped in desperation, a gilded trap with music and footlights. You look around Cora's room and think it's both. She shows you a photo of herself as a teenager, smiling in a tutu, holding a prop parasol, cheeks round and full. "I thought I was going to be a star," she says. "I didn't realise I already was, just not the kind that gets remembered." She takes you on a tour of the rooms. Each is decorated like a set. One looks like a Victorian drawing room, lace doilies, fake piano, chaise lounge. Another mimics a ship cabin with ropes and portholes and a hammock too small for sleeping. The next is all mirrors, walls, ceiling, floor. You glance in and catch your own reflection looking utterly lost. "These are for the regulars," she says. "Men who want to live inside a scene." You ask what the most popular fantasy is. She doesn't hesitate. "Rescue." You frown. "Rescue?" She nods. They want to save the girl, the orphan, the urchin, the ingenue. They come in with coins and scripts. They play the hero, she plays the grateful waif, and then they ruin her anyway. You walk past a room where a girl no older than 16 is getting dressed. Her stage costume sparkles in the low light. Tight corset, feathers, exaggerated lashes. She's staring at herself in the mirror, mouthing her lines. Then she stops. Her shoulders sag. And for a second you see the mask fall. She catches you watching. Flashes a smile so fast and polished it might as well be a slap. "Can I help you, sir?" she says in a sing-song voice. You shake your head. She winks. "Then don't linger." Outside the room, Cora sighs. We try to keep them safe, but the roles get sticky. After a while, the girl and the character become the same. It's easier than having two names. She tells you about a girl who played Juliet for 2 years, wouldn't respond to anything else. Even off stage she spoke in iambic pentameter. One night, she drank poison for real. Just a sip, just enough to scare a client into loving her. He didn't, Cora says. Of course he didn't. You exit the house through the stage door of the music hall. Fitting. Back on the street, a poster flaps in the wind. Miss Cecily Damour in her final performance. You recognise the name. You saw it in one of the ledgers weeks ago. You follow a boy pasting up posters. Ask him where she went. He shrugs. Went off with a banker. Or maybe a Belgian. She was crying, though. That's all I know. You walk on. You pass a theatre full of clapping. Another full of weeping. You walk past stages. And suddenly every brothel feels like one. Every woman, a script. Every man, a paying audience. And in this city, everyone's performing something. The tragedy is real. But so are the curtains. By now you've traced so many lines through this city they've started to blur. Brothels becoming boarding houses, theatres becoming auction blocks, women becoming performances. The maps are useless. The stories fold over each other like pages bent too many times. But there's one direction you haven't followed yet. Outward. Away from London's belly and toward the lines that fed it. Because all these women, these girls, these boys, these numbers, in ledgers and bodies behind curtains, they didn't all begin here. Many were brought. So now you follow the routes. You begin at the docks. The Thames is low this morning, sluggish and silver, and the barges creak like they're complaining. You pass warehouses with black-streaked brick and men unloading crates stamped with symbols from across the empire. Teak, tobacco, tea, and tucked among them, girls. You see them stepping carefully off the gangplank of a boat docked out of sight from the main piers, their shoes too clean, their eyes too wide. A man with a clipboard greets them, says something in French. Another responds in Italian. You don't need to hear the words to know what's happening. The ship is empty of passengers in the books, and yet here they are. You follow them as far as you can. A cart waits at the end of the lane. Open top, clean straw, meant to look harmless. They climb in. A canvas is drawn. The man with the clipboard tosses a coin to the driver, who tips his cap and rolls away. No one stops him. Here's your historical fact. By the mid to late 19th century, London was not just a city of vice. It was a hub for sex trafficking across Europe. Girls were brought in from Ireland, France, Italy, Germany, and Eastern Europe under the guise of work or marriage. They arrived alone, often illiterate, with promises of factory jobs or maid positions. Within hours, they were repurposed, repackaged. And your fringe fact? Some of these importers operated under the banners of legitimate businesses, textile mills, modelling agencies, even missionary schools. One case uncovered a bakery front that hired over 60 foreign girls in a single year, none of whom were ever seen again in the city's legal workforce. Their names vanished. But their scent lingered in the ledger margins, cinnamon and lavender soap. The scholarly debate tonight is uglier than most. Was this system fueled by demand or by indifference? Some argue that brothel owners and traffickers were simply feeding a pre-existing hunger, fulfilling the desires of men whose preferences extended to the exotic, the foreign, the unfamiliar. Others insist the system manufactured the appetite itself, training men to see imported girls as more available, more submissive, more disposable. Historians argue both sides with long words and clean hands. You visit a house in Paddington disguised as a hostel. A brass plaque reads, "The Miss Reed's Home for Young Women." Inside, it looks like a school. Rows of beds, scrubbed floors, a worn Bible at each nightstand. But the beds are all empty now. The house mother, a rigid woman with lion-coloured hair, says the girls were placed. No, she can't share names. Yes, they were all over 16. Yes, they spoke English. Probably. She closes the door quickly. You ask around the neighbourhood. A boy at the butcher's nods toward the stables. They used to walk the new girls there every Tuesday, he says, to show them the route, like they'd need it. You walk the route. It doesn't go to any factory. It goes to a row of genteel houses with thick curtains and polished door knockers. Houses with connections, with protections. The same symbol, triangle within a circle, is chalked beneath one stoop. You knock. No answer. But the curtain twitches. You stand there for a long moment, feeling the weight of the entire empire pressing down. Because this wasn't just a London vice, this was an export business. a product of Britain's massive, brutal colonial machine. And as much as the city imported bodies, it exported them too. Yes, outward. Girls sent to India, to Hong Kong, to Egypt. Some under the name of companions, others under less generous titles. British girls, Irish girls, even tall orphans from East End workhouses were packaged and shipped like fine lace to serve abroad, to entertain military officers, to please ambassadors, to keep colonial postings civilised. You find a newspaper clipping in a discarded envelope. 9 young ladies sent to Calcutta for domestic training. You doubt they were scrubbing floors. Back near the docks, you return to a small pub where sailors drink quietly before departure. You find an old man hunched over a bowl of eel pie. He tells you slowly that he once ran a ship with extra cargo, that some ports had people waiting who paid more than coin, that the girls would sing on the first day, cry on the third, and vanish by the 6th. He doesn't ask forgiveness. You don't offer any. You step outside and walk along the river. The wind off the Thames smells of salt, iron and oil, and under it all something you can't name, something rotting. The water looks slow, like it's trying to remember how to move. You sit on a bench and try to map it all in your head. The trains, the wag jobs, the tunnels, the houses, the coded notes, the marked doors, the folded cards. It's a web, but not a secret one. It's public, operated in plain sight. Because London never needed to hide it. It only needed you not to ask. You look down at your boots. They are wet. You didn't notice when. The tide is rising. The city is washing its hands, but not fast enough. You get up. Because somewhere out there, someone else just arrived, and you know exactly where they're being taken. The world has a funny way of dressing cruelty and science. In this city, it's wearing a white coat and holding a scalpel. You've seen brothels behind theatres, inside laundries, under chapels, but now you're standing outside a building that doesn't hide at all. It brags. Stone steps, Doric columns, and an iron plaque that reads London Anatomical Society, authorised by Royal Charter. This isn't a place where girls are sold, this is where they're studied. You climb the steps slowly. The building hums with that special kind of quiet you only find in medical institutions, a quiet that isn't peace but distance. The walls are whitewashed. The air smells like ether and chalk dust, and somewhere nearby you hear the soft ticking of a metronome. A student walks past you in a long apron, ink smudged on his sleeves, eyes focused on the notebook in his hands. He doesn't see you. The front desk is manned by a man with a cough and the posture of someone who's spent too long trying not to be noticed. You say you're here for the special lecture. He frowns, but waves you down the hall without asking questions. It's not a lecture room. It's a theatre. A dissection theatre. The seating is arranged in a semicircle around a central table. On that table, partially covered by a white sheet, is a body. Female. Young. No one says her name. The room fills slowly. Students mostly, and a few men who clearly aren't here to learn. They sit too comfortably, their coats are too fine. They watch not with curiosity, but hunger. The professor enters. He's not what you expect, soft-voiced, slightly bored, elegant in the way that suggests Oxford and too much brandy. He peels back the sheet like it's nothing and begins. She was found in Whitechapel, he says, a known girl of the night, suffering from tertiary syphilis and consumption, likely deceased from exposure. We will begin with the thoracic cavity. Here's your historical fact. During the Victorian period, medical schools in London often relied on unclaimed bodies for dissection. The 1832 Anatomy Act allowed institutions to use corpses not claimed by family, most often the poor, the imprisoned, and yes, sex workers. The law was meant to prevent grave robbing. In practice, it just gave exploitation a paper trail. Fringe fact: some doctors had standing arrangements with brothels and midwives. If a girl died during childbirth, overdose, or violent encounter, her body could be sold quietly to teaching hospitals. Payment was discreet, no death certificate needed. The girls became subjects, their names stripped, their lives reduced to arteries and lesions and unblinking eyes in jars, and the scholarly debate: was this medical advancement or ethical collapse? Some defend the practice, saying anatomy education saved lives, that these sacrifices, unwilling or not, advanced science. Others say it was just another form of class violence, that the rich could die in private graves while the poor died again on tables under men with notebooks, and women in sex work, they were always assumed disposable. Back in the theatre, the professor is discussing muscle tone. He's using a metal probe like a conductor's baton. His students take notes. No one asks who she was. You ask. The professor frowns. She was identified only by a pin found in her hair, no legal name, likely Irish. Teeth suggest poor nutrition. You ask again. He sighs. If you'd like to speak to the archive, we keep sketches and notes of all specimens. He says specimens, like he's describing birds. You leave the room. The archive is in the basement. A long, low space lined with shelves and boxes and jars. You find what you're looking for too easily. Ledger 12C, female. Found 7th March 1889. Age estimated 17. Cause of death, pulmonary edema, noted for signs of repeated trauma. Reproductive system marked as abnormal, a sketch included, and beneath it in a different hand, subject responded to touch during pre-autopsy preparation. Reclassified as alive for 4 minutes, no name obtained. You shut the ledger, there's a chill in your spine that hasn't left since you walked in here. You feel it now more than ever. It's not the building, it's what it stands on, who it stands on. You climb back into the daylight like you're emerging from a grave, and you start to see it everywhere. The doctors at the pub laughing over lamb. The young men with medical satchels following girls down alleys. The housemaid who limps because of a procedure gone wrong. The midwife who smells of gin and metal and refuses to look you in the eye. You speak to a woman who worked as a cleaner at an East End infirmary. They didn't just study the girls, she tells you. They poked them, asked them to show things, told her with Beardtamin it was for science. Said it didn't count if it was clinical. You ask if anyone protested. She laughs without humour. Protest? You think anyone cared about a whore's modesty? They were already in pieces, love. What's a little more? You pass a window later and catch your reflection. You look older, heavier. You understand now that the brothels weren't the bottom, they were the funnel. And at the very bottom was a table, a scalpel, and a note that read unclaimed. Because in this city, a girl could disappear 3 times, first when she entered the trade, second when she lost her name, and finally when she died, and someone called it education. You walk into the wind, wondering how many of London's great medical breakthroughs were built on the silence of broken girls, and how many men still wear white coats to bury the red beneath them. The first time you see the photograph, you don't quite believe it. Not because it's shocking, though it is, but because it's real. A girl, maybe 14, lying on a velvet chaise, barely dressed, staring dead-eyed into the lens. There's no backdrop, no props, just her body and the unspoken command to stay still, and underneath the image, in elegant pencil script, No. 7 East Wing. You're in a second-hand shop when you find it. South of the river, in a street too narrow for proper carriages and too crooked for fresh plaster. The place smells like mothballs and spoiled wood polish. There are books stacked on books, broken pipes, faded hats. Old tools no one remembers how to use. The photograph is tucked inside a cracked ledger labelled Inventory, 1886. You ask the shopkeeper where it came from. He shrugs. Clearing from an old house in Holborn. Whole trunk full of that sort of filth. Tossed most of it. Can't sell smut with children in it. But some of the rich ones, they liked 'em young and documented everything. He says it casually, like he's describing wallpaper patterns. You buy the photograph, you don't know why. Maybe to keep it out of someone else's hands, maybe because it feels like evidence, maybe because she looked at you. That's what gets you. The way she looked into the camera. Not shocked, not scared, just done. And just like that, you've stumbled into a new layer of the brothel machine, one you hadn't seen coming. One that doesn't need a bed or a client or a room with velvet drapes. Just a lens and a shutter. Here's your historical fact. The invention of photography in the mid-19th century was quickly co-opted into the world of erotic imagery. Though early photographs were expensive to produce, the allure of capturing a body permanently made it a growing market. Legal photographic studios offering artistic mise-en-mode nudes cropped up across London, but behind them an illegal industry flourished. Your fringe fact? There were entire brothels designed for photography, not for sex or for sex. For content. Clients paid to photograph the girls, or to commission scenes with costumes, props, restraints, in some cases. The photographs were mailed to collectors in other countries, hidden between pages of innocuous catalogues. Police raids occasionally turned up cabinets full of them, labelled, numbered, and sometimes stamped with club initials. One raid found over 300 images catalogued under the heading Little Lessons. The girls in those photographs were no older than 10, and the scholarly debate whether these images should be preserved as historical evidence or destroyed as crimes. Museums wrestle with this to this day. Some argue that erasing them erases the reality. Others say to keep them is to extend the harm. Most agree on one thing: they were never meant to be art. They were meant to be proof that someone could do whatever they wanted and someone else would make it permanent. You meet with a man who used to print photographs for the gentry. His name isn't important. He insists on that. He's old now, mouth full of tobacco, hands full of tremors, but his memory is clear. They didn't want portraits, Babiti says. They wanted poses, the sort that make you feel something bad in your throat. Some of them made the girls smile, said it made it feel less wrong. Others preferred crying. He pauses. I never kept a copy, not one. You don't know whether to believe him. He tells you about a house in Chelsea, a private club. Behind the front parlour was a camera room, red velvet curtains, lights on ropes, painted backdrops, schoolrooms, parlours, even a garden, set built indoors. The girls came from all over, some from local brothels, others from orphanages. You ask if they were paid. He laughs. You think it was about money? You walk from Chelsea to Clerkenwell, the photograph burning a hole in your coat pocket. You can't bring yourself to look at it again, but you don't throw it away. You're carrying it like it's a witness or a confession. You visit a printer's shop that once processed the images. It's abandoned now, windows shattered, the press long silent. Inside, the back room is half collapsed, but what's left is damning. A ledger, pages of orders, not names of course, just initials and requests. Subject, standing, no corset, with parasol. Subject, 2 girls, one seated, crying if possible. Subject, blonde preferred, ribbons provided. And there, at the bottom of a page, nearly worn through from time, an address. You go there, it's a townhouse, still standing, still respectable. Brass numbers, white curtains. A woman answers the door, middle-aged, sharp eyes. She looks at you like you've already said too much. You ask about the previous owner. She says the house has been in the family since 1885. You ask if she's related to Edward L., whose initials appear in the ledger. She closes the door in your face. But you saw the framed photo in the hall, a man with a pipe, and behind him, the same chaise from the photo in your pocket. You walk away, fast, because now it's all too real. The brothels traded in bodies, the clubs traded in fantasies, the medical theatres traded in remains, but the photographers, they traded in time. They made the pain last forever. You sit at the edge of a fountain later and take the photograph out again, just to look, just once more. You tell her you're sorry, it's not enough, but it's something. You fold the photo and slide it into a sealed envelope. Write unclaimed on the front. You leave it at the base of a statue of Queen Victoria. Maybe someone will find it. Maybe someone will ask. Maybe not. But you know she was here. And now, she'll be remembered. You're sitting on the steps of Parliament now, watching the carriages arrive like clockwork. Black lacquer, silver trim, gold crests on the doors. Men emerge from them with practised elegance. Top hats, starched collars, gloves so white they look like they've never been touched. Inside the building, laws are debated. Speeches made, declarations of morality passed down like commandments. But outside you've got a growing collection of names and faces who've passed through both brothels and these very doors. You know it's not a coincidence. You know it never was. You follow one of them, Lord something or other. The name doesn't matter. They all blur together, titled men with a public virtue and private appetites. He walks with a brisk confidence, a leather brief tucked under one arm, his other hand adjusting his cufflink like a nervous tick. You trail him past the ministry buildings, through the side streets that cut behind Whitehall, until he slips into a narrow door beneath a florist's shop. You wait 5 minutes, then follow. Inside, the air is warm with the scent of lilacs and damp earth. But past the buckets of flowers and the wilting roses, there's a hidden staircase spiralling downward, carved from stone that predates the empire itself. The door at the bottom isn't locked. It just wants you to believe it should be. You enter, and suddenly you're in a room that shouldn't exist. Not here, not under Parliament. Leather chairs, Persian rugs, and cigar smoke hanging in the air like mist. Along the walls, Portraits, not of queens or generals, but of girls. Young, soft-lit, framed in gold. Above a fireplace, a glass cabinet holds a delicate pair of slippers and a ribbon, carefully pinned to a plaque. For services rendered. At the far end of the room, 3 men sit around a low table. Not drunk, not laughing, just comfortable. One of them looks up. You recognise him. He made a speech last year about the dangers of moral laxity, called for stricter policing of the working-class girls corrupting the streets of London. He smiles. You're lost. You don't answer. You just look at the photos, the ribbon, the cabinet. Here's your historical fact. Members of Parliament, royalty and clergy were frequently involved in the vice trades of London. It wasn't a scandal, it was an open secret. In fact, entire networks of brothels existed solely to serve the elite. Some even required proof of status, titles, seals, or, in certain cases, signed oaths of science. Your fringe fact? In 1885, the very same year the maiden tribute of modern Babylon shocked the public with tales of underage prostitution, several politicians named in the exposé quietly disappeared from public life. Not one was prosecuted. One even received a promotion within the Colonial Office. The journalist who wrote the exposé, W.T. Stead, was briefly imprisoned, not for slander but for kidnapping, because he had purchased a girl to prove how easy it was. His sentence? 3 months. The scholarly debate? Whether Victorian society ever truly cared about these victims, or whether the outrage was performative. Many historians now argue that public morality campaigns were less about justice and more about control. Crackdowns happened not when exploitation peaked, but when it became too visible. When the press couldn't ignore it, when a name got too close to a scandal, the system didn't collapse. It adjusted, repainted its façades, shifted the rot to a new location. Back in the room, one of the men stands. He's older, grey at the temples, but sharp-eyed. He walks to a bookshelf and pulls down a slim volume, hands it to you. Inside are names, not clients, votes, past bills, recorded speeches, highlighted phrases like social hygiene, public decency and protecting the family. Under each a matching address, most lead back to brothels, some to clubs, few to houses you've already visited. This is what morality looks like, the man says. Paper thin, highly flammable. You ask why he's showing you this? Because eventually someone always wants out. Or in, he chuckles. We haven't decided which you are yet. You leave without speaking. The book is still in your coat. You emerge into daylight again, blinking like a creature pulled from the depths. Parliament still stands. The flags still flap in the wind. A child sells roasted chestnuts across the street. Nothing looks different. But you are? Because now you've seen how power protects itself. Not just with suns, but with architecture. With tunnels, with fouls, with just enough scandal to give the public a cathartic outcry and just enough deniability to carry on. You pass a street preacher hollering about the fall of Rome, about sin and sodomy and salvation. You wonder if he's on the list. You wonder how long before your name ends up in a book like the one in your pocket. Observer, trespasser, liability. You stop at a print shop and buy a sheet of parchment and a stub of sealing wax. You write a letter to no one in particular. Just a list of initials, places, descriptions. Then you seal it. No name, no return address. You leave it inside a confessional booth at St. Paul's. Maybe it'll end up in the right hands, maybe it won't. But you've done something. The city doesn't notice, but then, again, it never does. You thought the ugliest places were the ones with red windows and stained velvet. The ones where candles flicker and names are traded for numbers. But now you've found the opposite. Bright halls with polished floors, women in button dresses, and a whitewashed sign that reads The Society for the Rescue of Fallen Women. Neat script, holy intentions, the kind of place your grandmother would have donated lace handkerchiefs to. Believing it saves souls. You stand at the gate for a full minute before going in. It's quiet inside, too quiet. The kind of silence that demands gratitude. The entrance hall smells of carbolic soap and boiled cabbage. The woman who greets you, Miss Temperley, she says with that forced smile worn thin from years of disappointment, offers a tour like she's inviting you into a museum, not a halfway house for the broken. You follow her through rooms filled with plain cots, small wooden crosses, and posters that read things like, cleanliness is next to godliness, and obedience is your path to redemption. The girls inside are silent, not in prayer, not in sleep, just silent, like their voices were the first thing they had to give up to be allowed through the door. Miss Templey gestures proudly at a long table covered in embroidery samplers. They make these to sell, she says. Keeps the hands busy, helps them forget their sinful habits. You don't ask which habits she means, she wouldn't say anyway. She introduces one of the girls. This is Clara. She's been with us 5 months, has made real progress. Clara looks up at you with wide eyes and a stitched smile. You notice the trembling in her fingers, the way she flinches slightly when Miss Templey pats her shoulder. Here's your historical fact. Victorian rescue societies were established to reclaim women, mostly prostitutes or girls suspected of immoral behaviour, and reform them into proper Christian citizens. They operated under strict religious guidelines, often using isolation, hard labour, and scripture study as tools for redemption. Some were well-meaning, some were cruel, most were somewhere in between. Your fringe fact? Some societies kept girls locked in for years, not technically prisons, but training houses. They offered work in laundries, kitchens, and textile shops, but refused release until the women were deemed suitably purified. Marriage to a clean man, emigration to the colonies, or death were often the only escape routes, and sometimes not even then. One case from 1884 tells of a girl whose obituary listed her cause of death as moral exhaustion. And the scholarly debate? Did these institutions help or harm? Some argue they were the only refuge available for girls who had truly nowhere else to go. Others claim the societies simply swapped one kind of control for another, taking women from brothels and placing them under a different kind of surveillance, one cloaked in scripture and shame. In either case, the autonomy was rarely part of the deal. Back in the hall, you pass a classroom. Inside, a dozen girls sit stiffly at desks, reciting verses from Psalms. Their voices are flat, eyes lowered. A woman at the front walks with a rod in her hand, not striking, just reminding. You pause. A girl in the back glances at you, just for a second. You recognise her. Not from the brothels, not from the ledgers, but from the opium den days ago, and you was the one who whispered, "Nothing makes sense when you remember." She mouths something now. Still here. Miss Templey leads you on, oblivious. You're shown the sewing room, the chapel, the punishment closet, called the reflection chamber, of course. You don't ask what happens in there. The door is small, windowless, painted over enough times to hide the splinters underneath. Eventually, you're escorted to the back garden, a plot of overgrown weeds and cold benches. The girls are allowed 15 minutes of fresh air each day, says Miss Templey. We find too much freedom unsettles them. You nod like that makes sense. Before you leave, she presses a pamphlet into your hand. The Path to Purity. Inside are testimonials, all signed with initials, all eerily identical. I was lost, but now I am clean. I thank the Society for returning me to grace. My old life is gone, and I never want it back. All printed in the same neat script. You walk back through the halls, past the silent beds and the too bright windows. Every girl looks like she's on stage, performing the role of a redeemed woman. Because that's what's required here. Not healing, not justice, performance. Only now the costume is modesty and the price is silence. As you exit, you see a row of shoes lined by the door. All identical. Soft, grey, cloth-soled. Easy to walk in, easier to run in, if anyone were allowed to run. Outside, the city noise returns. It's jarring after the hush of the Society's walls, but it feels more honest too. A drunk sings off-key near the lamppost. A dog barks. A boy curses loudly at a cart driver. It's chaotic, rude, loud. It's real. You glance back once. A girl stands at the window watching you. It's Clara. She doesn't wave. She just blinks slowly, like she's trying to decide if freedom's all still possible once you've been saved without your consent. You walk away with the pamphlet still in your hand. You don't throw it out. You write a note on the back. She's still there. And she remembers everything. You slip it under the door of a newspaper office on Fleet Street. No one may read it, but you're learning now. Sometimes the record is all you can leave behind. You wake up to numbers. They rattle around your skull before your eyes even open. Prices, ages, head counts, ledger lines, and page margins. You dreamt of brass coins falling through the floorboards, of a chalkboard where names were erased and replaced with silhouettes. Even in sleep, you were counting. So today, You decide to stop wandering the back alleys and start asking directly, what does this trade actually pay? What does a night cost in London's underbelly? Not in morality, not in memory, but in shillings and pence, and more importantly, what's left afterward. You begin at a pub in Soho, quiet in the morning but already steeped in old gin. The woman behind the bar wipes glasses with a cloth that might once have been white. Her name is Edie, and her face tells stories even before she opens her mouth. Deep lines, flat eyes, but when you ask her what a girl makes on a good night, she doesn't blink. Depends who owns you, she says. You ask what she means. She smirks. If it's just you and your heels and some luck, you might keep half. If you're renting a room, subtract another quarter. Got a pimp, he takes his cut, got a baby? Good luck. By the time the copper takes his bribe, you've got enough for bread and a crust of rest. She pours herself a measure of gin, neat. You don't sell your body in this city, you lease it, and the leaseholder changes by the hour. Here's your historical fact. In 1888, the average East End prostitute could expect to make between 2 to 5 shillings per night, assuming 2 or 3 clients. A loaf of bread cost about 6pence. A decent room in a shared lodging house might cost a shilling. A cup of gin, 4pence. But none of these costs included the less visible ones. Bribes, protection money, or the cut given to madams or pimps who owned their schedules and their safety. Fringe fact, some brothels issued their own currency, wooden tokens or metal discs with the house's insignia. Girls were paid in these, then forced to exchange them for food, rent, or personal items, at inflated prices. Oh, whores. It wasn't illegal, just convenient. For the owners. The scholarly debate. Was prostitution in Victorian London ever financially empowering? Some scholars say yes, pointing to independent women who managed their own clients, owned property, and made more than domestic servants or factory workers. Others argue that the rare success stories were exceptions, not proof of the rule. For most, it was survival work, temporary, dangerous, and economically rigged against them, especially for women of colour, Irish migrants, or those without social ties. You spend the afternoon following the money. At a lodging house in Bethnal Green, a girl named Bess shows you her account book. It's barely a book, just torn paper with tallied lines, scribbled in charcoal. Each line is a client, each slash a debt. Laundry owed, bread owed, boots repaired owed. She has more dashes than numbers. You ever catch up, you ask? She laughs. You ever try to fill a bucket with a hole in it? She tells you about a man who offered her a sovereign, 20 shillings, for something unusual. She won't say what, only that she still has nightmares about it and spent the money within 2 days. Bought a coat, she says, then burned it. You speak to a boy named Jack who works behind a tavern and offers private company to clients who don't ask too many questions. He charges half what the girls do. Why? Because they say I don't count. You ask who they are. Anyone with money. He shows you a small velvet pouch where he keeps his earnings, 2 coins, a button, and a lucky tooth. You nod like that makes sense. You walk through the market later and see it all differently. The vendor calling out fresh eels used to be a girl named Lottie, but now she just scales fish. It's cleaner. The man who shines boots used to work nights too. He has a limp now and says it's better this way. You pass a woman who used to run girls but now runs a soup line. She says the only thing more exhausting than selling bodies is explaining why they were sold in the first place. You visit a pawn shop in Spitalfields where the broker shows you a pile of items traded by working girls, lockets, shoes, hairbrushes, sometimes even underclothes, a corset with pearl buttons, a ring with someone else's initials. He points to a box behind the counter. That's where I keep the ones I think they'll come back for. You ask how often they do. He says nothing. You find an old copy of the Morning Herald from 1879, folded between pages of a sewing pattern in a second-hand shop. There's a small classified ad circled in red ink. Discreet companionship, no disease, guaranteed silence. 3s. Ask for Nellie near Aldgate. 3 shillings, the price of 2 pints, a candle, and maybe a clean sheet if you bargain. You sit at a pub and write it down. Cost of a girl's time, 3 shillings. Cost of the dress she wears, 12 shillings. Cost of the room she sleeps in, 1 shilling per night. Cost of her name once she loses it, incalculable. You ask the barman how much he makes in a week. 8, maybe 9 shillings, he says. Why? You just nod. Because if a girl makes more in a night than a man does in a week and still ends up with nothing, the math's not broken. It was rigged from the start. You walk back through Whitechapel in the early dark, the fog rolling in low like it's crawling home for supper. You pass a girl counting coins in her gloved hand, squinting to see the markings. She looks up and smiles faintly. "Got enough for tonight," she says. You ask what that means. "Means I'll eat," she replies. "Means I won't have to smile again till tomorrow." And then she walks away, boots clicking, hips swaying, not for show but from muscle memory. You don't follow her, you just watch the fog swallow her whole. You don't hear him before you see him, which is strange. London usually announces its monsters with fanfare, shouting headlines, pub gossip, and the ever-dramatic street corner preacher claiming the devil walks among us. But when it comes to this one, this butcher, this phantom, he moves like a whisper in the fog, a blade in a dream. You know his name before anyone speaks it. Jack, not Jack Smith, not Jack Thomas, just Jack. You find his shadow hanging over Whitechapel like smoke. It's been weeks since the last woman was found, but the fear hasn't left. It clings to alleyways and settles in window cracks. Women walk in pairs now, or not at all. Men glance over their shoulders more than they ever did while doing worse. And everyone's looking sideways at the brothels, as if they're breeding grounds for evil, not victims of it. You retrace his steps, even though you know it's pointless. The press already turned it into a carnival, and the police already failed everyone involved. But you do it anyway, because the women Jack killed weren't the first to suffer, and they weren't the last. And something about his story is wrapped tight around the one you've been unravelling. You stand outside a 29 Hanbury Street. The door is shut. The tenants don't speak anymore, but the bloodstain, they say, is still there, under layers of scrubbed wood and denial. You move on to Bucks Row. It's quieter than you expected. You expected screaming, and then Mitre Square. That one stays with you. Not because of the body, though the crime scene reports still haunt, but because of what was found nearby. A message scrawled on the wall in chalk. The Jews are the men that will not be blamed for nothing. They washed it off before anyone could properly examine it. Said it might incite riots. Said it was dangerous, but not as dangerous as the man who left it. Here's your historical fact. In 1888, 5 women, Mary Ann Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, and Mary Jane Kelly, were murdered in the East End. All were sex workers or assumed to be. The killer was never caught. Jack the Ripper became legend. But the women? They became footnotes, punchlines in grotesque ballads, faces on trading cards, nameless until recently to most people. Your fringe fact? The police received dozens of letters claiming to be from Jack, many of them hoaxes, but at least one letter came with a preserved human kidney. The recipient, the chairman of the Whitechapel Vigilance Committee. That letter ended with, "Catch me when you can." It was signed simply Saucy Jack. And the scholarly debate? Everyone argues over his identity. Was he a butcher, a doctor, a nobleman, a lunatic? But the more important question lingers in quieter corners of historical circles. Why were these women so easily discarded before they were ever killed? Why did it take a serial murderer for anyone to notice how many women were already bleeding in the dark? Scholars today argue that Jack wasn't the story. He was the symptom. The real disease was what allowed him to walk through it all unnoticed. You speak with a retired constable who was posted nearby during the panic. He pulls a clay pipe from his coat and lights it slowly. "No one cared till the papers made it a show," he says. "Women went missing every week in Whitechapel. No fuss, no search party, just more space in the beds." You ask if he ever saw anything. He shrugs. "Saw lots, nothing anyone wanted to write down." You ask about Mary Jane Kelly. The youngest, the last, the one found in her own bed, body unrecognisable. He flinches. That one was personal. That's what haunts people now, the precision, the escalation, the fact that someone took his time and no one heard a thing. You visit a brothel that's closed now, boarded up after the Ripper panic. The madam moved out, the girls scattered, but a candle still burns behind the broken slats. You slip in through the back, careful not to disturb the air. Inside, someone's left a shrine, a small pile of personal things, a comb, a pair of gloves, a single child's shoe, a crumpled photograph of a woman with her arms folded. Her eyes are defiant. Someone's written they were more than meat in charcoal above it. You kneel for a moment, not because you're religious, because it feels like the right thing to do, because this isn't about Jack anymore. It's about what he made visible. Every girl walking the streets now carries a name in her pocket. One of the murdered 5, whispered like a shield. You hear them muttered under breath at night. Be safe, Mary Jane. Watch the alleys, Annie. Don't end up like Liz. You catch a girl carving CE into the side of a bench. Catherine Eddowes. She looks up. Just reminding people, she says. They forget too fast. You leave her with a coin and no warning. She already knows. You walk until the fog rolls in heavy again, curling low like it's mourning something too big to hold. You remember every place you've visited, every girl's face, every closed door, every open drawer. And you think about how easy it is to be erased here. But harder now, because Jack made ghosts that won't settle. He made a space in the story for those who never had one before. In his own twisted way, he made them unforgettable. You hate him for that. But you also thank the city for remembering, finally. Oh, even if it took blood on cobblestones and entrails on the bedspread to do it. Even if it's too late for most. You hear the word sanitization before you see it in action. It's whispered by an older woman sweeping the steps outside a closed brothel. She says it like it's a storm on the horizon, not yet arrived, but already bending the trees. They're coming, she mutters. Not for the men, for the rooms, for the maps. You ask who they are. She just taps her broom against the stoop like punctuation. The ones with white gloves and clean consciences. You see them 2 days later, policemen, inspectors, politicians with measuring sticks and moral panic tucked into their coat pockets. They arrive in pairs, never alone, always in daylight, always with clipboards and loud boots. They don't look into the girl's eyes, don't knock. They just barge in, toss sheets aside, measure bed frames, note the lack of ventilation, and declare the space unfit for decent habitation. Then they leave, and shortly after, men with crowbars and paint buckets arrive. Here's your historical fact. Following public scandals and mounting pressure from religious reformers and moral societies, the late Victorian era saw a wave of social hygiene efforts, citywide campaigns to clean up London's red light districts. These efforts often included mapping known brothels, identifying disorderly houses, and forcibly shutting them down under vague nuisance laws. The Metropolitan Police's 1894 vice map coloured entire neighbourhoods in red ink. Fringe fact: during these crackdowns, some brothel owners bribed officials to keep their locations off the record, offering not just cash but information, silence, or occasional visits. As a result, many brothels were targeted not because they were the worst, but because they were the least connected. The girls in those places didn't just lose their livelihoods, they lost their homes. The scholarly debate: was the Great Sanitization a step toward modern health reform, or a targeted erasure of the only haven some women had? Some argue it forced progress, leading to better regulations and fewer abuses. Others point out it created a vacuum, driving sex work further underground, where conditions worsened and violence grew. The respectable middle class got its cleaner maps, the women got darker alleys. You walk the old routes and find boarded doors where girls used to stand. Pubs have new signs, family-friendly. Dance halls once known for secret staircases now offer afternoon tea and cucumber sandwiches. The streets feel wider, colder, not safer, just quieter. You find Nellie again, the one from the newspaper ad, long retired now. She sits on a bench near Camden Market with a cigarette and a laugh like sandpaper. They said they were cleaning up the city, she says, but what they did was bury it alive. She taps ash into her palm. Some girls went to workhouses, others ended up with rescue societies. Most just moved. She waves her hand vaguely west. Out of the light. Into places no one bothers to check. That's where it all went. Same business. Fewer exits. She tells you about a friend of hers who tried to go straight, became a cleaner in a textile mill. She lasted 6 weeks, then came back. Said the factory floor was worse than any brothel. You visit one of the last open houses on the south end of the river. A stubborn remnant of an era being paved over. The madam, a wiry woman named Dotty, has painted the shutters pink and dares the constables to tear it down. "What, you going to arrest me for housekeeping?" she says. "I sell tea and conversation." You see 4 girls inside, quiet, cautious, not quite smiling. "They're not interested in helping us," Dotty says. "They just want us invisible." You ask how long she'll stay open. She shrugs. As long as someone's got a coin and nowhere else to spend it. You walk down what used to be one of London's busiest vice alleys. Now it's a footpath with decorative lanterns and heritage plaques. One plaque reads, "Site of former lodging house, restored 1901. No mention of what kind of lodging, no mention of who slept there. Just restored. Like the past was a piece of furniture that needed varnishing. You duck into a side street where some stones still smell like old gin and cheap perfume. There's graffiti on the wall, black paint on brick. They wash the walls but not the blood. It's almost beautiful. You write it down in your notebook. By the docks, you find a girl selling apples. She's too clean to be working the street, too dirty to be in service. She tells you she used to work the steps behind the tavern until they fenced them off and built a cafe with gaslight chandeliers. Funny, isn't it, she says. They turned our brothel into a bakery. Still men lining up for sweet things, or she tosses you an apple. On the house. You thank her. She grins. We all owe each other something. You bite into it. It's sour. You sit by the river and watch the boats go by, ferrymen, traders, some tourists even. None of them know the streets were redrawn by scandal and fear, that there used to be a girl on every corner with a fake name and real debts, that the great sanitization didn't end the trade, just pushed it behind new walls, safer on paper, more dangerous in practice. The maps are clean now, but the girls, they're still out there, just harder to find, and maybe, in some awful way, that was always the point. You take out your notebook and draw a line where a brothel used to be. You don't name names, just mark it with an X for the ones still hiding. You're back where you started now, standing over the city as it exhales smoke into a grey, indifferent sky. London never sleeps, not really. It just shifts posture. You look down from the bridge at the Thames dragging itself beneath you, thick with the runoff of centuries. Somewhere under that water are old bones, dropped rings, broken bottles, and probably a name or two that never made it into the ledgers. It's not that they were forgotten, just washed away. You've traced every alley, flipped every stone, followed every cold trail. And what you've found isn't just a world of darkness, but a kind of gravity. Something that pulls everything down. The brothels, the girls, the men, the money, the secrets. All sinking toward the same murky truth. London didn't just tolerate this system, it needed it. You step into a narrow street, once home to 6 brothels, now papered with rental signs and fresh paint. The ground is still uneven, the brick warped like it remembers the boots that paced it for years. You walk past a new storefront, an art gallery. Clean glass, curated plants. Inside, someone's displayed a series of found objects from the Victorian period. Lace gloves, combs, a corset draped over a mannequin with no face. You go in. There's a description placard beside it. Recovered from beneath floorboards in Spitalfields. Identity unknown. Circa 1890. You laugh quietly, not because it's funny, because now her corset is art. But she's still just unknown. Here's your final historical fact. Victorian London buried its sins behind progress. For every rescue society or sanitation campaign, there were 10 new ways to sell bodies with cleaner branding. Private clubs replaced street corners. Hostess houses replaced brothels. Even the term prostitute began to vanish from polite conversation, replaced with euphemisms like actress, shopgirl, entertainer, or simply fallen. Final fringe fact. Some of the tunnels you've walked through, beneath pubs, between theatres and gentlemen's clubs, are still there. Most people don't know what they were for. Some are bricked up, others lead nowhere. But the echoes remain. One was rediscovered during the construction of a luxury hotel in Holborn. The developers named the cocktail bar above it the Velvet Passage. And your last scholarly debate. Whether it's possible to tell this story, really tell it, without exploiting it again. Whether revisiting this history helps us see the past more clearly, or just commodifies pain under a different spotlight. Some say these stories honour the voices lost. Others worry they trap them in an endless loop of suffering, retold for entertainment. There's no clear answer. But you're telling it anyway, because silence is a kind of lie too. You visit one last girl. Her name is Elsie, 63. She was born in the back of a brothel that's now a stationery shop. She never left the East End, worked the streets for decades, knows every tunnel, every alley, every name that's been washed from the walls. You sit with her on a bench overlooking the river. I still remember their voices, she says. Not the men, the girls, the ones who left, the ones who never got to. You ask what she wants people to know. She lights a cigarette with a trembling hand. That we weren't just holes to rent. We were funny. We were angry. We had inside jokes. We had dreams. We loved each other. Sometimes. She exhales slowly. They always act like we were ghosts, but we weren't dead, we were busy. She smiles, soft and defiant. I want a statue, she adds, tapping the bench. Right here. Not of Jack. Not of some copper. Just one of us sitting, breathing, still here. You promise her you'll remember. You promise her that if nothing else, you'll write it down. So you do. In the notebook you've been carrying, among the scribbled names and addresses and whispers, you write, she lived, she mattered, she laughed. And then you write it again, because you know someone will try to erase it. And if this story's taught you anything, it's that names disappear faster than breath unless someone says them out loud over and over until they stick to the air like soot. You walk away slowly, you falls, letting the river's voice drown your thoughts. Fog settles in again. Horses clop along the cobblestones. A distant bell rings. Somewhere, maybe, a girl still waits behind a curtained window. Somewhere else, someone swears the world never existed. But you know better. You were there. And now, so is everyone else. So now you're back in bed, probably lying there in that small pocket of quiet between dreams and midnight street noise, still sifting through everything you've seen, the fog, the silk, the secrets, the shoes lined up at the door like rows of unanswered questions. Maybe you're still holding on to a few names, or maybe they've blurred together into one long exhale of suffering and survival. Let it settle for a moment. Because here's the thing no one tells you about history. It doesn't live in the big headlines or in the statues carved by people who never got their hands dirty. It lives in corners, in ledgers, in alleyways and under cracked floorboards and whispered nicknames scratched into bedposts. It lives in those places where official records look the other way, where silence was currency and where the truth never came with a clean ending. But tonight, you did the unthinkable. You walked through it, you listened, you stood in rooms you were never supposed to see and looked girls in the eye who were told they should never be remembered. You proved them wrong, and now, after all the maps and ledgers and ghost stories, you're part of it too. Not just a tourist in the dark, but a witness, a chronicler, someone who knows that London's gas lamps didn't just light the streets, they cast shadows long enough to hide everything else. So yeah, maybe you won't sleep easily tonight. Maybe your dreams will be crowded with ribbons and ledgers and curtains that never quite close. But don't fight it. Let it drift through you like fog over cobblestones. Let it remind you that behind every polished facade there's a back door. And behind that, a girl who once said no one would remember her. But you do. You still do.